Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this regular meeting of the Verona Planning Board on September 22nd, 2022. Madam Secretary, can you please call roll?
Mr. Katza?
Here.
Mr. Lilly?
Here.
Mr. Heineman?
Here.
Mr. Lonergan? Mr. Kamudi? Mr. Diol?
Here.
Councilman McAvoy?
Here.
Mr. Neal? Mayor Roman?
Here.
Vice Chairman Fresky?
Here.
Chairperson Pearson?
Here.
Mr. Massara?
Here.
And also for the record, Aaron Traeger from Brightview Engineering and Michael DiCarlo, the zoning officer, are also present.
Can everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The agenda and notice of this meeting has been posted 48 hours in advance of the public meeting on the bulletin board designated for this purpose, located in the lobby of the municipal building, 600 Bloomfield Avenue, Verona, New Jersey. The agenda and notice of this meeting has been faxed or electronically transmitted to 2 newspapers circulating within the township as required by statute in order so that the public may be informed 48 hours in advance of this public meeting. I would now like to, first I want to just say I'm glad the public has turned out tonight. For your information, there were 3 documents that were sent to the planning board late this afternoon that have been added under the agenda on the website. They're not under the documents for the application per se. They're really the legal documents that document the progress on how this project has come to be. So if anybody is interested, you can read there under the agenda. I would now like to open public participation for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. If anybody has a comment or question about anything that's not on tonight's agenda, please come to the mic, state your name and your address. Seeing none, I think, yes, seeing none, we will close the public participation until later on. I would now like to ask everybody if they received the meeting minutes for our special meeting from August 9th, 2022. Yes. Does anybody have any corrections, or if they have they sent them directly to Ashley? No. Okay. Ashley, any comments?
There was just that one that you sent me on page 2, paragraph 3. It should have read word unlikely instead of work unlikely.
Perfect. Okay. Does anybody want to move those meeting minutes from August 9th, 2022?
So moved.
Moved by Councilman McAvoy. Second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Fresky. Do we do a roll call? No? All that approve them?
Aye.
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 Anybody not approve them? And any abstentions? Okay. The meeting minutes are approved. And we will now move into new business. The application 2022-04, preliminary and final site plan for 1 Sunset Avenue, Block 303, Lot 1. Mr. Inglesino, welcome.
I pressed the button this time, and I thank you for the sign, so I know I pressed the button. Good evening, Madam Chair, Mr. Mayor, members of the board, and the public. My name is John Inglesino from the law firm of Inglesino Webster, located in Parsippany, New Jersey. We're here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Verona Sunset Urban Renewal, who is the contract purchaser of property located, I think it's Lot 4 in Block 303 on the tax map of Verona, and the address is 1 Sunset Avenue, Verona, New Jersey. The Verona portion of this property consists of approximately 5.5 acres. From a zoning perspective, this is an as-of-right application for 200 residential units with amenity space, a pool, dog run, courtyards, lighting, landscaping, stormwater management systems, and associated infrastructure. 15 of the 200 units will be deed-restricted affordable housing units, so the project will actually consist of 185 market-rate units and 15 affordable housing units. The project arises through a settlement between the Township of Verona and the current owner of the property, Spectrum 360 LLC. The original settlement was dated May 31 of 2019. There's a first amended and restated settlement agreement dated January of 2022. And we sent, as the chairwoman had indicated, the first amended and restated settlement agreement today to be entered into the record as Exhibit A1. I provided the board secretary with a hard copy marked as such. That settlement agreement was subject to a fairness hearing, and by order dated September 15th, 2021, the Honorable Robert H. Gardner, Superior Court's judge in Essex County, determined that the settlement agreement is fair and reasonable to low and moderate income households in the region, and we entered that order into the record today as Exhibit A2. The Township of Verona adopted a resolution declaring the subject property as an area in need of redevelopment on a non-condemnation basis on August 20th of 2019. The redevelopment plan, which serves as the basis for the zoning of this property, was adopted by the township's governing body on March 8th of 2021, and the redevelopment plan was then amended by ordinance, it's actually ordinance 2021-14 on June 21, 2021. Significantly, in Section 4 of the settlement agreement, the Township of Verona agreed that the property is, quote, developable and, quote, suitable, as those terms are defined under COA's rules for this particular project. Under Section 14 of the settlement agreement, the Township of Verona, which includes under the agreement, this planning board will cooperate with the applicant to secure all the approvals. We still have to go through this process and make our proofs. On January 17th of this year, 2022, the Township of Verona entered into a redevelopment agreement with the applicant, which agreement sets forth the rights of the parties concerning this development. The redevelopment agreement was also submitted and is now in the record as Exhibit A3. Pursuant to Section 4.9F of the redevelopment agreement, approval of this application will earn taxpayers of Verona a payment of $3,250,000 towards Verona Affordable Housing Trust Fund to offset costs incurred by the township in connection with other affordable housing developments in the community. That was part of the agreement that was reached between the applicant and the township. We are not seeking any variances for this as-of-right application. We look forward to presenting our application to the board as we continue to work with the township to implement Verona's housing element and fair share plan. We will have 4 witnesses during the course of this application. Sean Savage of Matrix New World is the project civil engineer. Linda Teicher is our landscape architect. Matt Seckler from Stonefield Engineering is our traffic expert. Jack Raker of Minnow and Wasco is the project's architect. Tonight you will hear limited testimony from the project's engineer, Sean Savage. You will then hear testimony from the project architect, Jack Raker. As the board knows, applicants' engineers generally testifies to things outside of the building, such as parking and site circulation and loading and impervious coverage and lot coverage and stormwater management, to name a few. The architect testifies to things inside the building. Tonight, our engineer, Mr. Savage, will provide his some engineering testimony, but I want to be clear, tonight he will not be addressing stormwater management or green infrastructure. That testimony will be provided at a subsequent meeting. Based on comment letters, I may say very comprehensive and very well-written comment letters that we received from the Verona Environmental Commission and the board engineer, the applicant is in the process of performing additional tests to determine to what extent we can maximize and accommodate green infrastructure on this site. And we're in the process of doing those tests now in response to those review letters. So that's why we're not able to provide that testimony tonight, but we will at a later date. Since elements of the landscape architect's testimony is related to green infrastructure, Ms. Raker's testimony will be provided in conjunction with the engineer's testimony on green infrastructure so that that is done comprehensively and together in one evening. So we'll provide the stormwater management testimony with the green infrastructure testimony at a later date.
Mr. Inglesino, if I might, will your engineer be addressing any of the, like the sanitary sewer system? Will any of that be being addressed this evening, or is it all going to be in conjunction with the overhaul that you may or may not have to do on the plans?
Well, when you say sanitary store, stormwater,
Sanitary store is separate.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of capacity for sewer, may provide testimony in that, but anything having to do with stormwater management is not going to be testified to this evening.
That's fine, but there's sanitary sewer was another point of interest, and whether the system could handle the output that would be coming from the proposed site. And it actually says on the plans, it sort of questioned like to be tested, but there was no data submitted on that.
Yeah.
So my question is that testimony going to also be on hold, or is that going to be discussed?
Yeah, I think we'll testify to that at a later date.
Okay.
So similarly, I understand your traffic expert is not here tonight, and we are, again, in response to comment letters, doing additional counts, so we'll provide traffic testimony at a later date. So if there are any questions of the board with regard to my opening comments, I'd be happy to try and address them. If not, I'd like to call Mr. Savage as my first witness.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Inglesino, you stated in your opening comments that the applicant intends not to apply for any variances. Furthermore, the cover letter that you submitted to our board secretary on June 7, 2022 states that Township Council Resolution 2022-092 determined that you had satisfied the consistency requirements in the redevelopment plan and redevelopment agreement, but that resolution by title specifically states that the finding of consistency excludes the size of the courtyard patios and the locations of the circular drive for which variances may be sought by the redeveloper. Do you intend to seek any variances, or do you feel that you are going to be able to address those items?
We'll be able to address those items.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Okay, so with no further questions, Mr. Savage, you're the first witness. You can step up and be sworn in.
You know, I do have one comment, and it does apply to the letter that you sent to Mrs. Neal dated June 7, 2022, where you stated that the property in question was designated as Block 303, Lot 4 on the official tax map of Verona. But when it comes to your stormwater management, you are including the entire 8 acres, but you're only dealing with 4 in Verona. And it's sort of a conflict from my perspective that you're getting the benefit of the full 8 acres when you talk about your stormwater management, but you're actually only dealing with 5 that are on the, especially on the downhill trajectory towards Verona. So I just wanted to bring that point to you, both Mr. Inglesino and Mr. Seckler, and thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Savage, state your full name for the record, please, and address.
Sean Savage, 442 Highway 35, Eatontown, New Jersey.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Savage, can you briefly provide the board with your educational and professional background and describe any licenses that you possess?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering, been practicing for about 25 years now, licensed in state of New Jersey as a professional engineer, testified throughout New Jersey, different towns and cities.
And you've been accepted as an expert witness in the area of civil engineering?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I offer Mr. Savage as an expert in the area of civil engineering.
I have. So, anybody have any questions or objections? No. Okay, he would be accepted.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Mr. Savage, can you please outline the engineering aspects of this project consistent with my opening remarks?
Yes. So, as previously mentioned, the site is a combination of about 5 acres located in Verona. That's Block 301, Lot 4. And there's another approximately 2.9 acres, which is located in Montclair. That's Block 301, Lot 5, and Block 401, Lot 1. The development, building, parking, sidewalks, et cetera, is all located within Verona. There is some minor grading proposed within Montclair. In general, with the site, I'll refer to what is the existing condition plan from the submitted set of site plans. This is showing the existing conditions of the site. Obviously has a large multi-story building on it, which is utilized as a school. There's a lot of surface parking. There's playground areas, basketball courts, a ball field in it. And then there's some areas located with Verona, which still has some trees located on it. And then there's a section within Montclair, which is down on the bottom, if you can see the pointer, on the eastern side, which also has a larger amount of trees that are existing conditions on that side of the property.
You know, sir, I have a suggestion. Maybe that projector can be pulled a little bit closer this way.
As far as
I don't want to overwhelm.
Would you even bring the screen forward too?
I would even move the screen forward if it's not a problem.
Yeah, I think she's trying to pull the visual closer to the audience.
So that's as far as I can go.
I mean, it's.
Give us extension board. Second.
I know.
That makes it small. Well, that could never be.
Blow it up. I just think it's, you know, what to see. You can't see it. Right.
I think it's block 303, block 301. Oh, not clear. Well, we're only, okay. Well, our application is. Yeah. Yeah, I got you.
All right, I think, ready to go again?
Yeah, I mean, as large as you can make it. Because once again, the whole point is to benefit everyone in the room, not just board members who, can't see.
Yeah, and there are additional seats over here if folks want to get closer to it, that's for sure.
Okay. Should I continue? You ready? Okay. So just to continue where I left off, so the site to the west is Afterglow. Up here, we have Sunset, which is to the north, and then Bloomfield, which is to the north and the east, located down here. In existing conditions, there are two driveway entrances. One's located sort of close to mid-block along Sunset here, and there's another one located closer to the intersection with Bloomfield. And again, as existing conditions, just briefly going back through it, the majority of the site within Verona is either cleared or there's the large building and surface parking areas, et cetera, associated with that. And I think that kind of sets the existing conditions. We can move on to the.
Oh, and that's from the actual plan.
Yeah, I mentioned up front, that was the existing condition sheet 2 of the submitted site plan set.
So visuals that we're showing from the plan set, we're not going to mark as exhibits. We'll only mark exhibits something that's not in the package.
Do you not want to mark these exhibits?
No, we don't mark exhibits that are in the plan set, only illustrations that are.
You didn't actually mark your exhibits that you mentioned, A, B, and C.
I did. I marked them and I gave them to Ashley.
Okay. So now I'm going to be referring to the geometry plan. This is also a sheet that was included in the site plan set. So this is showing the proposed building here located kind of in the center of the subject property here. So this proposed building is multi-levels. There's, based upon the topography of the site, the building kind of steps up in different levels. The architect will get it further into that in more detail when he comes up. We are maintaining those two entrances, the existing entrances off of Sunset. The one here, about mid-block on Sunset, give or take, will be the access to a drop-off, it's called a drop-off loop, and the entrance to the garage, which is located here, within the building area. And so that is a two-level, multi-level garage here, located within the building footprint here. The second entrance down here, located closer to Broomfield, services for would be used for like a loading or drop off in terms of moving in, things like that. There are in this area there's 8 surface parking stalls Within the building, there's 373, which gets us to 381 spaces total, which is based upon the 200 proposed units, is the required amount of parking.
Will that entrance be the entrance for UPS?
The one down here, both of these, we ran like a FedEx sized vehicle and an SU-30 through those, and they both could come through there. So, I mean, there's a potential that maybe a FedEx might come up here. This one down here is sort of more envisioned more about loading. The trash room is also located down in this area. That trash will be, kind of getting ahead of myself, but that trash will be brought out, and so there'll be more loading, trash, things moving in, moving out, things such as that. FedEx could certainly use it too, but it might be more centrally located to come in off the front here. That's the main entrance to the building here. Again, the building here located, this kind of cutting through the east side of the building is the...
Sorry, I can't hear these talking. I can't hear the witness. Sorry.
Just cutting through, just to the east of the building here is the township line. As you can see, so the entirety of the building, proposed parking areas, et cetera, are within the Verona piece of the property.
Is the impervious coverage requirement based on the entire?
Wait, what's going on? We're not asking questions. This is, when we open public questions, that's when everybody gets to ask questions. I'm sorry to cut you off like that, but thank you.
Just get back to sort of the layout here. So in addition to the building, there's a number of courtyard areas, outdoor areas open to the sky here, located in between wings of the building. There's one located here, which, concrete walks, planting areas, etc. The one in the middle here is, sidewalks, but also has a pool located in it. And then there's the third one here, which, is more of a, sidewalks and landscaping. And the architect will get into more detail, sort of the intended uses of those areas. The intent, we can jump over to, as previously mentioned, there's no variances required from required setbacks, lot coverages, building heights, et cetera. I can briefly jump into lot coverage, just to sort of satisfy that one. The requirement, or the allowance here, is 75% of lot coverage. If we were to look at the entirety of the tract, the 8 acres, we're proposing about 40.6% coverage. If we took and looked at that with just the Verona piece of the property, that's the 5 acres, then we're proposing 60% coverage. So either way, we're well under the allowable lot coverages for the property. In addition to meeting all the setbacks from the building to the roads, we're also providing there's a 30-foot required buffer from the property line as well, that we're proposing along the road frontages here, and then along the residential, or basically all the boundaries of the property. The access roads to the site do come through that buffer, which they are allowed within the ordinance to be able to access the property. I know there's some discussion that we'll have regarding the drop-off area up here. In terms of utilities, other than stormwater management at this point, we're going to be proposing water connections, separate fire and domestic lines. One set will be connecting out to Afterglow, and another set will be connecting over to Sunset. Same with gas. We're going to be proposing a gas connection to Sunset and one to Afterglow. Sanitary sewer, in terms of the connection, we're proposing to collect sanitary sewer from the building, and we're proposing one connection out to Afterglow down close to the intersection of Sunset. As mentioned earlier, we'll get into the questions about the capacity and existing versus proposed flows at the next hearing. So I think, in terms of the internal part of the garage, that'll be covered later, but with the surface parking that's down here located closer to Bloomfield, again, mentioned, we're providing, 24-foot drive aisles where there's the perpendicular parking stalls here. There's a handicapped stall that's van accessible located down there. And then there's a drop-off area. You can see it striped off here, right at the eastern edge of that parking lot. That would be for, again, it could be a FedEx, it could be loading and unloading, or people moving in and out. It could be, whatever it may be, but that's an area proposed for that. In this area, we're also proposing a small dog area, dog run, located right there next to that drop-off area. And in terms of, I think, the site layout and utilities, et cetera, and that pretty much covers everything in terms of the site, short of getting into stormwater.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, that concludes Mr. Savage's affirmative testimony, so I turn it back to you for questions of the board professionals, and the public.
I will entertain questions from every member of the board. I just want to, before I forget, you said that you were going to be getting gas or water from Afterglow. Is there an easement? How are you getting service?
There wouldn't be, there's, where there's the public gas in the street, there would be no easement associated with that. You'd be connecting to those lines. There's no easement required for that.
You wouldn't have to dig to put a water line in?
Of course, yeah. And you would have to get
So whose property are you digging on? That's my question.
It's a typical, you're within a street, you're within a public right of way, you would have to submit to the town for a permit to install that. It's just like a single family house putting in a gas line.
Do you guys have direct access to Afterglow?
Yes.
Beyond the house? That's what I'm, just on that corner, right?
So the site has frontage right here on Afterglow.
Right, just down at the corner though.
Well, I mean, a couple hundred feet back, and then all along this section.
That's Sunset.
Yeah, so there's direct access for
Okay.
utilities. We'll obviously have to contact the gas company and, electric companies and all those companies and have them coordinate with exactly where they want that connection, but there would be no easement associated with that. It would be a permit through the Township Building Department.
And on your plans, in conjunction with the sanitary sewer line that you say is going straight out to Sunset, it does...
No, to Afterglow.
I'm sorry. Well, the sanitary sewer is going to Afterglow, but it's going to run into the Sunset line, correct?
Yeah, it's going to flow.
Mm-hmm. There was something marked on your plans that notated...
There was a note about I believe the existing, it was probably a note associated with the existing manhole. I think the survey, couldn't have gotten into it, so I think we just had verification about it's a typical sort of a test pit or whatever needs to be done to finalize that location of that sanitary manhole in terms of its depth and stuff. That's a sort of a typical check you would do before you're making that connection. We're going to have to submit, obviously, for sanitary sewer here. We're going to have to go through the various township approvals with, public works, et cetera. We'd have to go through the sewage authority, and depending on the existing versus proposed flow, we would have to go through the state for that approval.
I mean, are there tests that you as the applicant perform in terms of the capacity that could be handled by that?
No,
Because
it wouldn't be a test. You would compare the existing versus the proposed sanitary flow, and that's your analysis. If when we contact the entity that controls those lines, then they may come up and say, there's an issue we want to have looked at there, and that's something that we might look at. But basically, going through that approval process, if the entity that controls that line, doesn't have an issue with that line, there would be no need to do any test of the
what if
flows.
there are pre-existing
Calculate.
issues with those lines?
Then
what if-
we'll have to deal with that.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm making a point here that there are pre-existing issues right now with the neighborhood having problems.
So
With the
as
sewer
we're going through
line.
the process, and typically we wouldn't submit to those agencies until we get to the board approval to make that next step. But clearly, if they have an issue there, we're going to have to address that issue. We can't connect and have it flowing, we're going to have to deal with that.
Okay, I think there should be some discussion before the next meeting about that, in terms of you talking to
Well,
our engineering department.
yeah, we will, but candidly, it's not an issue for the board. It's an issue that we have to deal with the construction
The
department.
board has to approve it, so it's an issue for the board. Thank you, though.
Chair, if I may.
Sure.
Brightview Engineering's completeness review of the application specifically calls out under its utilities section all of these issues. A comparison of the existing versus proposed sanitary sewer flow shall be provided. Confirmation that the township treatment plant can handle the flow. Confirm that only one sewer connection will be required. Pipe capacity calculations. Capping the existing lateral. Existing water demand versus proposed water demand. Will serve letters from all the utility companies. And calculations supporting the water demand for the proposed units. So clearly, our engineers identified these as items that should be part of this.
Yeah, we're going to provide those. I mean, those are typically things that you would work out in a resolution compliance stage or the conditions of an approval, that if we're so approved and we go there and we have an issue with the sanitary sewer line that we can't connect, well, we wouldn't be able to get a CO at that time. They have to be fixed. So those are typical things those are typical comments I've seen, and we deal with those during the resolution compliance typically.
What if a scenario comes up where you aren't able to place your utility laterals where you've shown them on the plan? You may have to cross another section or pick up a line at another location.
Well, then we may, depending upon that, we may have to come back for amended approval.
Yeah, but it's not, it basically, once we get through a typical board approval, we would make those submissions for the water and sanitary sewer approvals in terms of getting those permits, from the town, the sewage authority, the water company, and the DEP. During that process is where that becomes vetted, and in those situations, if something has to change, if the lateral has to move to Sunset because the town, prefers it coming off of there, then that would be done. It doesn't materially change the submission, though.
Given the scale of this development and the major change of use here from existing use, I'm curious as to why this is something that has not already been calculated and looked into in your initial engineering. Why is this something you would not want to confirm at this stage already?
I mean, to be honest, we typically don't submit. We typically would not submit to those agencies at this level. I mean, this is there is a school. There is it's not a single family house. There's a substantial existing demand or flow from there.
And this was an office building before it was.
For that. So, we have to do those comparisons but that's not a typical thing that we would do right up front. I mean, we would work through that process, and if has to be offsite improvements that are associated with this because we're increasing that flow to that pipe, we'll have to deal with that.
So in evaluating the feasibility of this project, costing it out, et cetera, you mentioned internal review versus applying to actual agencies. Did you do any internal review?
I'm not the developer, I'm the engineer. So as part of what I do, I'm not sure, I know there's been discussions with I assume early on with, this site was put into a redevelopment zone and was zoned by the town for 200 units. So, you would envision that the town, by zoning this for this number of units, is also making some statement regarding the capacity of the utilities.
Yeah, and if I may just interject, that's why I pointed out Section 4 of the settlement agreement, which, I'll repeat, says the Township of Verona agreed that the property is developable and suitable as those terms are defined under COA's regulation.
Right.
So there was some level of review and some level of concurrence that the property, could handle this type of development.
Without the engineering done, though, let's be fair, Mr. Inglesino, the engineering and the capacity tests have not been done. And you would even state that you haven't finished some of the other testing that is ongoing right now. So to be fair, all of that is contingent upon the capability of this property to handle all of the things that are supposed to go on it.
So under the municipal land use law in the state of New Jersey, those are not issues for the board to determine. The board has
The board is supposed to determine, and I am interrupting you, I'm sorry, but stormwater management, it's our responsibility. And that's one of the things.
We're not
No.
discussing stormwater management.
But
We're discussing the,
sanitary sewers?
we're discussing the propensity and the potential for the development for the utilities and the infrastructure to handle this development. That is a preliminary determination that is made by the township in connection with its zoning, with its planning, and in this case, specific representations that were made in the settlement agreement. The actual resolution of those issues are not issues for this board. It's just not. You don't issue those permits. Those permits are issued by other agencies, not by this board. The board's only role legally, in my humble opinion, is to determine whether or not there is the ability, the potential ability for utilities and the like to be able to accommodate this project. And there is no indication that ability does not exist. In fact, again, I would argue that based upon the affirmative representations made by the township in the settlement agreement, that is more than satisfied for purposes of the board's presentation.
Okay, well, those determinations weren't tested, and that's exactly what you're supposed to provide, that.
No, that's not the way it works. I defer to Mr. Messeri.
What Mr. Lucino said is accurate. The sanitary sewer capacity is something that the applicant will have to ensure, but not to this board and not testify to this board that it is satisfactory. There are other departments and other permits. This board is considering the site plan and makes an assumption that everything that is testified to can be accomplished. If it can, such as the location of the sanitary sewer line. If it cannot be accomplished, then they come back with an amended site plan because they say we can't connect.
Not the location, the capacity.
Well, both. Well, the capacity has to do with the location because they're different size diameters of sanitary sewer lines. So they have to make sure that the flow, which will be a mathematical calculation based on the engineer's numbers and, certainly not my numbers, but it is not up to this board to hear testimony as far as the capacity.
I was actually trying to be more general. We are here to hear the entire site plan and not, block out certain sections that we're not supposed to know about, so I'm just saying.
So, in fairness, it's not that we're not supposed to.
I know, well, we're not supposed to hear testimony on the.
No, it's not that you're not supposed to hear it, but they don't have to prove it. So the testimony is, we believe
I
that.
don't agree with that.
We believe that it will meet the sanitary, the capacity of the existing.
I'd like to hear, then I'd like to hear our engineers' thoughts on that, so that
Well,
at
the
least he
calculations
can.
haven't been done because they don't have to be done at this juncture. That's not a proof with the site plan application. Go ahead, Mike.
This isn't, not this application, but with the Pearl development we just got pleased with, they're going to build recently.
With the Pearl development that was recently approved and it's going to be under construction, we ran into the same situation where they had a proposed water connection for their building, We made them do pressure tests when they came back with their Tito Pay permits. They weren't satisfactory to meet the height of the building. Now they have to install booster pumps. So that's on them, not on us.
But the key is they got site plan approval.
Yes,
Without submitting any of those
Yes.
calculations. And then afterward, they submit the calculations, and the burden is on them to show that there's capacity.
yes, they came to us after they got the state approvals, and then we made them do the pressure test, and then,
But we didn't require it in pro. It was never discussed in pro.
I don't believe that the neighborhood is having as much of an issue.
Well, that's, I mean, that's an issue that has to be addressed, but it's not for right now.
It will be addressed at some point, I hope. I hope that
Sure it will be.
there'll be discussion on it.
We have the best professionals, and it will be addressed.
We do. But, site plan review, it also entails stormwater, which I know that you agree with. At least, I think you agree with that.
Of course, we
Okay,
indicated we
good.
would be providing stormwater testimony, just not tonight.
Does anybody else on the board have any questions for Mr. Seckler?
Savage.
Yes.
Say that again?
Mr. Savage. Mr. Seckler's our
Oh,
traffic engineer.
Savage, sorry. S.
Seckler, Savage, it sounds very similar.
Yes, go ahead, Doc.
Yes. In the past, one of the past meetings, from Sunset Avenue coming into an entry coming into the site, the buffer zone was, the roadway encroached on the buffer zone. Has that been corrected?
The site entrances, obviously to access a site, you have to traverse the buffer. So those entrances do cross through the landscape buffer, which is permitted. You have to have access to a property. And those are existing.
Not just the access, but like the shape, the loop that came in. This was from a past meeting, and it's very difficult to look at this, even when I've got it right in front of me, to see exactly where it is. But it was like part of that loop went into the buffer zone.
Well, we corrected that aspect. So
That's what I wanted to know.
this loop, what you're looking at is the loop road here. If you can see, it's kind of got an oblong shape.
Right.
It was previously a circular. What we did is the dashed line here, if you kind of look at you won't be able to see it here, but on your plan, it runs right along where we kind of, compressed that circle. That was to keep that outside that buffer.
Okay. I
So
just wanted to make
that
sure
part
that
was adjusted.
corrected.
And Mr. Deal, you're exactly correct. Previous iteration of the plan, you're exactly correct. And during the consistency review, council, that issue was identified and corrected.
Okay, thank you.
Internal circulation is going to be dealt with by the traffic engineer?
Yeah, with respect to within the building or on site?
You're talking about the...
On site with.
Yeah,
the loop with
I can go through it again. I briefly kind of went through it. The access here, and again, both of these are existing access points.
So 1 inch is 30.
Well, no, not when you're on the screen. But yeah, it's drawn to scale, which is the important part, yeah. So this access drive located, let's call it mid-block Sunset, is coming up to a drop-off loop road or loop driveway, and then the entrance to the internal garage. So this is right here at the end of this, the south end of that loop is the entrance to the garage, which is within the building. The lower parking area here, closer to Bloomfield, is what is envisioned. There's 8 surface parking stalls there for some people to use, but it's more envisioned as, and there's a loading area here. So that's envisioned as people moving in and out, maybe a FedEx truck. There's the trash room. The trash will be collected and then moved out on trash day. That type of activity would occur in that lower parking area. In terms of the internal movements around the garage, that'll be covered with the architect.
But can you let's take a movement of a vehicle that comes in, say they park and they go out, so we can track the vehicular movement.
Yeah, I mean, a car, let's say take it, because there's, a car would come in on this one, they could enter on this side of the driveway here. They would come up, they could either loop around this and drop someone off, or they could pull into the garage, and then they're going to come out here and they're going to pull out and get back on the Sunset to leave the site. The lower parking would be the same thing. I mean, it's just creating a loop where someone could come in off of Sunset, leave back to Sunset.
So I understand all that, but just in terms of daily movements, especially during peak.
Oh, that'll be traffic engineering.
Okay,
Yeah,
then I'll
that'll be
hold that question.
Mr. Seckler.
I'm still a little hung up on the FedEx UPS, because for a building like this, there's going to be a lot of those deliveries
I
happening.
think I'd probably kind of push that to maybe Jack or the owner, the applicant, in terms of how they envision with their, there's a lot of these buildings will have, a specific room where packages will
Right,
come
that's what I
in.
want to understand where that is.
That's sort of internal to the building, so I would defer on that part of it. In terms of a truck movement, like a truck being able to circulate those areas, the truck can do that. In terms of where they want those packages to be delivered, I would defer that part of it.
I would expand that and say the applicant should certainly testify as to how that's going to work, because you have this service area, but you also have this pretty long corridor to get to the mailroom. So how are you going to enforce that?
That'll be
The
addressed.
delivery workers aren't just going to take the path of least resistance and then clog up the circle to peak times where you have not just package delivery, but food delivery and anything else that's going on. Again, given the move to hybrid work environments and the peak times has shifted. So I am also kind of concerned looking at this that there will be congestion issues, particularly on the main route as well.
And I think combination of the architect and even the traffic engineer in terms of traffic movements can address those comments, those concerns.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Mr. Lucino, will this witness or another witness be testifying as to the size of the patios flagged in the council resolution?
Mr. Raker will testify to that.
Okay, thank you.
The architect will handle it.
Yes.
Please.
In regards to stormwater, I speak on behalf of the board. I believe that we appreciate that there's going to be revisions based on the comments from my office and the Environmental Commission. Will you be submitting revised plans in advance of the next?
Yes, we intend to submit prior the required number of days, revised plans, drainage report, et cetera, for that.
Okay.
And also revised, we're doing additional geotechnical testing, so we'll have a revised geotechnical report, site plans, and drainage report.
Excellent. And then on the sanitary, would you object or could you provide the existing versus proposed? Well, it might not be something this board can approve. I think it would give some level of comfort, because right now, seeing a big gray box, they think 1 million gallons a day. And it might help them with their decision towards this project to just understand that, yes, it's an undertaking, but maybe it's not massive. Maybe it is. Maybe it's a decrease. Without any calculations, it's hard to even assume.
Yeah,
So-
we can provide that. I mean, typically, we would look at existing through, maybe the water records or something like that, but we can base it off of the use and square footages. And obviously, the proposed we can provide.
Okay, even using the NJC, I guess 7:14, just to compare its current use versus proposed, just so we have something that we're at least, looking at before the board moves forward.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Savage, one question. You were talking about the second entrance closer to Bloomfield Avenue. And I'm just curious to know, is there any type of access from that area around the back of the building for, say, emergency services or anything like that?
No, the emergency access would not be able to circulate, through around the site, given the topography of this site is there are sections that are rather steep. This building, is going to be sprinklered, and we do have, frontage access on 2 sides, plus the access roads, off of Sunset. So there is no there's no path around the building.
I'm thinking also in terms of landscaping. You have a pool back there, service to the pool, things like that that are going to need.
There is, I don't know if you can switch to the grading plan. There is, the area back here along the building, there is a, 15, 20 foot wide area that is graded relatively flat that would allow, a maintenance person to get back there. It's not envisioned that they would drive a service truck back there, things like that, but there is an area back there where if they needed to put a ladder up against the building or things like that, or, they would have access back there. More of a, a person, maybe a lawnmower, things like that, but not a vehicle.
Do they plan on putting any fencing or anything back there because of the steep slope?
There is a section of along, it's kind of hard to see, but along this area here, there's existing fence, which is basically at the point where the steep slopes really kick in. So a lot of that fence is going to remain, and then there's some pockets of it, like right here, where we had to do a little bit of grading. We're messing with the existing fence, that there's going to be sections of proposed fence. So this area along that steep slope area here will have a fence, combination of existing and proposed.
Okay. So to follow on from Councilman McAvoy's comments, so that entire side will be inaccessible to, except for on foot, to emergency first responders. So even though there's a sprinkler system, if there was an exterior fire on that side of the building, what would be the plan? Or what's the proposal to address that?
I mean, there's not going to be the access for vehicles back there. So, I mean, if they would run a hose or through the sprinklers, we can certainly put a fire department connection in certain areas. What part of this process is going to be getting comments from the fire department, fire officials, and again, we're going to have to address what they come up with. So if they come back and say they want, fire department connections around the back, or they want something else, we're going to have to comply with that. So, it's something we haven't gotten those comments yet, but we're going to have to address them.
Yeah, we'll address comments from the fire department. And Mr. Savage, in your experience, isn't it true that fire departments generally do not want vehicle access all around the building because of the close proximity of the building to
Yeah,
the
I mean,
cliff?
there's
So
definitely
they're not gonna
concerns
want
here
it.
with
So they're
the
probably not
cliff
gonna want it.
and also the proximity. You're right. I mean, they would have to have that vehicle pretty close to the building, which
But to the
obviously for a
To the
fall.
extent they want standpipes and things of that nature, we'll accommodate.
As being very kind, calling that cliff a steep slope. That's a cliff. So, and there's a fence for that reason. And you're keeping that fence?
We're keeping the majority of it, and then where we have to remove sections of it for the development, we're replacing that with in-kind fencing.
One thing I just want to confirm, you mentioned that you're going to be revamping some of the plans, and you're going to be getting them to us, but then you're testifying at the next meeting. So when do we, what is the lead time for board review, for our experts to be able to review it, for the public, and for the Environmental Commission and any other agency that has to review revamped stormwater management and/or other plans?
So, Madam Chair, that's one of the issues we were discussing before the meeting. And I think
Okay.
if we get close to adjourning the meeting this evening, we would probably ask for the next meeting to be in November so that there would be ample time for us to provide the information and the plans with sufficient lead time for review by your professionals and the public. We're in the process of doing testing right now, and I think your point is, and it's well taken, we don't want to put any undue pressure or not provide ample time for review. So we understand that, we hear that, we share that point.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll discuss that
Yeah,
somewhat later in the meeting. Go ahead, Mayor.
Mr. Savage, we received a letter from a resident who could not be here tonight, who specifically asked about soil erosion control and soil stockpile during construction, indicating that the plans do not show locations of potential soil stockpiles during construction.
Hold on. I think that, and I hate to be overly technical, but I think somebody has to appear for that.
Well,
I think members of the board, can ask a question.
Yes, if it comes from a member of the board, we're happy to answer the question.
Yes. So on behalf of the board, do you,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
are you able to provide information on proposed locations of soil stockpiles and plans for soil erosion control during the project? I do see a detail of a sample soil stockpile, but I don't see any, and some specifications as to where.
yeah, the plan, I believe, it may be hard to see with all the, I'm trying to see if I have it here tonight, but
Can you
think so,
name
not
the
that
page number of your plans?
I don't know the page number off the top of my head. It would read soil conservation plan.
So it's going to be an early one.
No, it would probably be midway.
10? 10 of 15?
All right.
We'll
But
provide.
regardless, is we can, if it's not there, we'll add it. And obviously, we're in the process, we'll be submitting to Soil District for their approval, and if they want multiple ones, bigger ones, smaller ones, whatever, we'll provide that.
So this hasn't been submitted for a permit from the Soil Conservation District yet?
Typically, we'll wait for certain approvals till, yeah, no,
Yes,
I mean,
okay.
I was just explaining what, no, we haven't.
And obviously, the drainage or the stormwater changes could impact soil moving calculations, stuff that we requested in our letter, which you'd have then at the next submission.
We would then, a lot of times, it's one of the reasons you generally like to wait for changes like that, or if we had submitted, we just have to, resubmit to Soil District. But yeah, so they're going to see the stuff that's pending.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Savage, are you prepared, is this tonight, can we ask questions about the excavating? Is that something we'd be asking you or someone else? Witness?
No, I mean, it depends on the question. I mean, I can attempt to answer it. It's really not something I get into in terms of the method of the construction, if that's where you're going, but if you want to ask the question.
It may do a little bit with, my concern is the southeast corner that we were all just talking about and the steep slopes. My question is, I'm seeing elevations on here. At the corner of the building, it's 573. And obviously, there's a little bit of room there. As you stated, there's 15, 20 feet where it's pretty level, but it drops off quickly. So my question is, at that corner, is there basement below there? How far down are we excavating to get to bedrock? Has there been soil testing there?
We've done soil testing, which has been, to date, been associated with stormwater. There would potentially be more related to the structural of the building. In terms of basement, no basement, I would defer that to the architect who will be up next.
Okay. So is there any idea at that specific corner or along that ridge line, how far down excavation would have to go for a 4-story building?
When he's up next, he'll be able to address that.
Okay.
So is it safe to assume there's been no geotechnical investigations or borings?
There has been. I was just pointing out that those have been related to stormwater. So there's different sort of tests that you would do associated with structural buildings. So we do have borings that were done, and bedrock in the vast majority of those was relatively shallow. Some of it, 4 or 5 feet down in that range. There were a couple that were deeper. The ones that were deeper, I believe, were up more towards the Sunset Afterglow intersection. I was just wanting to make the distinction that they're not for building purposes, but.
To be clear, you did 6 borehole tests on a 5-acre piece of property.
There was actually 11 done in that report, but there were 6 that were associated with some of the stormwater analysis. There was 11 done, and we're doing another round of them. I think it's going to be another 10 coming up.
And you said that they were doing some geotechnical testing. Can you tell us what you're doing?
What we're doing, again, is for stormwater purposes. These are going to be borings, 10 borings, and permeability testing. Part of the question with stormwater is whether or not the site can actually recharge, infiltrate, and so that's the purpose of those.
And we're deferring stormwater to another evening.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's those testing would be associated with that. There's certain numbers of tests that you would have to do related to the structural design of a building, which is not.
But there's
other types of testing going on the site right now that.
No, I'm just saying that for the purpose of the structural design, there may be other tests that might be needed in terms of a structural engineer. That's not what I'm doing is related to stormwater.
Mr. Inglesino, will there be a structural engineer or a geotechnical engineer that you are going to have come before this board?
think those are construction related issues.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Those are construction related issues?
Well, it's site preparation, so it's something that's very concerning. It's site prep.
Well,
You can all hold your heads and go, oh
Yeah.
no, here she goes again, but this is site prep, correct?
Again, that's not,
it's not the board's purview.
this board's purview is the site plan.
But you have to prep it to put the stormwater management systems in.
That's how the board approves or denies, and then they have to get there. We don't dictate or approve how they get there. We approve, we're zoning board, we're the municipal land use law. We're not construction code officials, we're not construction code experts.
I'm simply, the magic of this.
Well, hold on, let me finish. If somebody wants to build a 10-story building, and you approve the building, then they have to do it. You can't say, we're going to deny it. Suppose we allow 10-story buildings. We can't say we're going to deny it because we don't think you can do it. We're going to say, we give you approval because we have to under the municipal land use law. You have met all of the criteria under the municipal land use law. Now, if it's impossible for them to do it, then they can't. But it's not up to us to determine whether they can accomplish it. They're here because they believe they can accomplish it. We're here with their belief that they can accomplish it and addressing the site plan. We're not addressing the means of construction.
I actually wasn't asking about construction. If you listen to me, I was asking about the installation of stormwater management features, which entails site prep. According to your plans, it entailed 12 feet of removal of rock. So that's what I'm asking about.
Yeah,
That has to do with stormwater management.
Right, and
Thank
as we indicated, we will provide testimony with regard to stormwater management at another hearing. But with regard to construction-related issues on the site, it's the New Jersey Uniform Construction Code that governs. This board, to Mr. Massara's point, and I think he's correct, is that this board governs the site plan application aspects of the development. The New Jersey Uniform Construction Code relegates and governs the construction aspect of it, and your construction code official and your construction department are the ones who enforce and ensure that the New Jersey Construction Code is complied with. That's not the purview of this board. That would be after a site plan approval. So for issues that kind of get into the constructability of the project, so to say, that's not for this board. That's for the Uniform Construction Code and for your construction code official to enforce.
And so I assume blasting would fall into that same category?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I assume blasting would fall into that same category? Are you willing to discuss any details there?
So blasting would be a regulated activity. There's a state statute.
It's actually regulated by the town as well.
Yeah, I think the town's ordinance codifies the state requirements with regard to blasting. So if blasting were to be required or desired or whatever, then the applicant would be required to comply with those regulations. And one of the conditions of approval for this application and for every application is that the applicant would be required to comply with all other applicable and relevant rules and regulations concerning the project.
It's the same issue, but.
Well, we choose.
Is what we want to discuss. Does anyone else from the board have any other questions?
Madam Chairwoman, it's not.
I'm sorry, but there are certain questions that are kind of being flipped off, and
I don't think the applicant is flipping them off. I think there's a clear distinction between this board's role and other departments' roles. And this board's role is to review the site plan, and as I said before, they're proposing a site plan. It's not up to this board to decide whether they can get there or the means at which they.
we want to understand. We want to gain a better understanding of the plan. So instead of saying it's not up to us to approve that, maybe an explanation is okay with you to give.
I mean, there's nothing-
That's the
there's
bottom
nothing
line.
wrong
We're
with it.
trying to understand how this is all going to happen. That's all.
So would it be fair to say that under the the review letter from Brightview, site plan approval in terms of cubic yards of import or fill. If we meet again in November, can the architect get geotechnical investigations, submit, cross sections of showing all the earthwork to us? Something that you guys would have to do in terms of doing an additional geotechnical investigation, preparing the cross-section plans and doing the earthwork.
Mr. Casino, they have to be submitted to Essex Morris anyway, I mean, so.
I understand.
Right, I mean.
We have a right to know how the whole thing is supposed to come together. That's all, I feel like we're asking questions, and it's really simple. You can say, although it's not part of the site plan approval process, sure, we'll answer that. But instead, you're basically saying, no, you don't need to know the answer to that. And it's a little offensive.
Well, we're not,
so,
with all respect, we're not saying that. And I don't want people to think we're saying
okay,
that.
but that's how I'm taking it.
All right, and apologies if that's the way it's coming across, but that's not the case. These developments are done sort of sequentially. So some of the work that you are requesting is really not done until after the approval is obtained. And as Mr. Massara said, if we can't do that work in a way that satisfies your construction code officials, then we can't implement the project. So, what we're saying is, we sound like we don't have some things done because it's not the part of the process where we would do those things.
Okay.
So where we are today is to put forth our site plan application, which has been deemed complete, which has been deemed consistent with the redevelopment plan by the governing body, and took a very detailed review. And we're here before this board to hopefully obtain approval for this site plan. That's not the end of the ballgame. There is a lot of work to be done post-site plan approval in order to implement the project. And I think what's happening tonight is you're focusing on issues that come later in the process. And so it appears as though we're saying, well, we don't have this, we don't have that, because we wouldn't at this stage of the process. I think conceptually, that's what's going on.
Well, at some point, I guess I will want to understand how the stormwater management system are systems that are at least planned at this point are meant to be installed.
Yeah,
Because
no,
again, their installation is part of our review process.
We have said repeatedly that we have an
Thank you.
obligation and we will provide detailed testimony on stormwater management.
Does anyone else from the board have any questions, or any of our professionals have any further questions at this time?
I have just a general question for procedure while this witness is up here. Mr. Inglesino, you mentioned the comments and questions from the township's professionals and boards and commissions. Are there any of those that this witness should address, or is this something where you are going to agree to comply? Are there any of these that you wish to flag at this time that you disagree with?
Well, we're going to come back and address those, because a lot of those comments is what has facilitated the additional testing that we're doing now. So we'll deal with those in a comprehensive way rather than piecemeal fashion.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, so at this time, and let's try to keep this in mind, we're supposed to ask questions pertaining to Mr. Savage's testimony and the questions that Mr. Lucino and he discussed. But I will open to the public any questions that you may have for Mr. Savage. So please come to the lectern, or the mic rather, and state your name and address for the record.
I don't know if this is working. Erica Davila, 32 Sunset Avenue. Just a question, and maybe this is for our own attorney. Davila.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure I understand. The planning board's authority right now is to determine consistency with the redevelopment plan. No.
No.
It's to determine whether the site plan is consistent?
This is, the application is a site plan pursuant to the redevelopment, the site plan pursuant to the redevelopment plan. So it's not a consistency determination, it's an application for site plan approval.
Okay, so in the redevelopment plan, when it said that things like sewer the capacity and everything needed to be determined and presented, where does that come into play? Is that
That would
not
come as part of the process. but
as
not
part of what process?
Well, the process for getting building permits eventually. I don't know what particular part of the redevelopment plan you're talking about, but the process, as Mr. Inglesino laid out, it comes in stages. We have the site plan now. Okay, the site plan deals with whatever was in the redevelopment plan, the number of units, the stories, the buffer, the ingress and egress and things like that.
Okay, so for the public, because I think that the vast majority of the public's concerns are around sewer and water runoff.
Sure.
So my question is, I'm not getting clarity up here, and it didn't seem like we had clarity on who do we go to for that?
Water runoff is this board, certainly.
Uh-huh.
But there's a distinction between sanitary sewer and stormwater.
I fully understand that.
Stormwater, our engineers have asked questions of the applicant for clarification and specificity. The applicant has said we need more time to do those studies.
I understand that. That part, the sewer. What about the sewer
No,
part?
that's stormwater. That's the stormwater, where they will come back with stormwater testimony based upon new calculations and further investigation.
I understand stormwater runoff is different than sewer.
Right.
My question is,
Right.
the sewer part,
Yes.
where does that come into play? Who can the public go to ask questions about the sewer capacity, and where do they need to go to provide information?
The construction code office.
The construction code
Right,
office.
exactly, the construction officials.
I mean the sanitary sewer. Thank you. Yeah, call your office.
Because there will be
You might be getting a lot of phone calls.
There will be calculations done based on the number of the prospective tenants.
Okay.
And then there will be a difference, as Mr. Savage has said before, there is some history there because it was an office building and now it is a school. So they will do math that is beyond me that will calculate the necessary capacity.
Yeah, I just read the statute. I just wanted to know where it was going and when that was happening. It sounds like after this process is complete, then it's going to you.
But Eric had asked a question earlier where he had asked whether they would provide supplemental information,
Yeah.
not something that they would be seeking approval of, but supplemental information just for people's knowledge of what the general calculations are, and the applicant said, yes, we would do that. So prior to them submitting it to Mike for final approval, Eric and this board will have some idea of whether there is capacity in the sanitary sewer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate the clarification.
Hi, I'm Brian Conroy. I live at 24 Sunset Avenue. I'm a professional engineer, 3 states, and my background's in land development. Question regarding the TWA application in accordance with NJSA 714A 22.4. Anything over 8,000 gallons per day, TWA application will need to be submitted. My question to the board is the applicant should investigate the sewer, the size of the sewer.
These are questions of the applicant, not of the board.
Of the board.
Questions to the applicant.
Questions to the applicant, yes.
Based on the testimony that was provided.
Based on the testimony provided. The sewer should be evaluated because there's going to be approximately 38,000 gallons per day increase. And I think one of the letters did recommend, does the town sewer have the ability to handle that capacity? But the system could be in bad shape, so I don't know, TV video should be done, especially since they couldn't open the manhole, to evaluate the condition of the sewer as it goes downhill. There's been a lot of flooding, and it could be in condition. If the conditions can't be met, there are pump stations and other things where you could reroute the sewer. But if the road gets dug up, I would request that the board look into, I don't know if there's a moratorium on the road, the paving of the road, but they would have to repave the road and repair the extents of the sewer accordingly. As a condition of approval, that's something to look into. Regarding the stormwater analysis.
I just want to say that he did not give testimony really on stormwater. when he does, and when they resubmit the stormwater, I think that's when,
We can talk about stormwater.
yeah, I think that we really should stick to the testimony that Mr. Savage gave this evening, even though it was very broad brushstroke of the application, because otherwise you're going to get into things that he didn't testify on.
Okay.
And questions as opposed to statements would be appreciated as well.
My second question then discussed about sewer and drop off of packages. Can the applicant provide an auto turn movement plan to show that a trash truck can properly pick up? I mean, it's currently right now, the trash truck always backs up, can't quite get into the trash facility, and it's a lot smaller where you said the trash pickup is, and it's very close to the intersection. So I think that should be taken into consideration as far as drop off of traffic and auto turn movement for the.
We do have the plan already.
You have a turning radius.
Yep. And
Was it submitted to us?
I think it was prepared right after, so that can be submitted. Yeah, I'm just saying we have one. And so in terms of the trash, just this is going to be a private hauler. So the frequency and size of that vehicle is would be subject to the approval of the developer. So, if it has to be a smaller vehicle to make circulation, then it would be. We have run 30-foot, we ran a trash truck, a SU-30, SU-40 through that drop-off area, and they all can circulate through there.
No,
We'll make that submission.
Yeah, I think just for the public's, because every day the trash gets picked up for the school, what would the frequency be of the pickup from a private hauler and the size of the unit would be able to maneuver within that space in the close proximity to the intersection?
So we'll commit to make that submission as part of our next submission.
Can I ask a question just for clarification, because I have to memorialize this? Are you suggesting that there is a large enough radius or there is not? And I think the question is, and the suggestion is that it would be better for all concerned that there be a radius, that there be significant radius?
I would say if he submits an auto turn movement showing whether it's a K-turn or that it can do a radius within the said area, I think the concern is that the proximity, to the intersection and their cars queuing, getting into the traffic study, which I'm not going to talk about since we're not talking about traffic. These plan into consideration to the applicant.
Yeah, we will submit an auto turn radius plan as part of our next submission, which will address the questions that were raised.
And Mr. Messino, would the applicant consent, or would the applicant agree that it would have to be capable of an auto turn?
Well, I think.
Program that.
Yeah, there's a program, we'll submit one.
Well, that has to be capable of somehow, whether it came to.
May I clarify the
Yes.
language a little bit? Okay.
Yes,
So first
yes,
off,
yes.
I would typically say that we almost always see auto turn drawings in site plan submissions, testified to generally by the traffic engineer, and they get the length of the township's longest fire truck and show its ability to traverse all of the roadways within the site. That's something we see in almost every application of this scale. And I would say that that is a reasonable expectation of this board, that we would see that and that would be testified to by the applicant's traffic engineer. Applicants typically also always provide specific testimony as to their garbage pickup plans, including the route that a trash pickup truck would take, the locations and sizes of storage containers, and the frequency of pickup. So I would say that this, at a minimum, should be part of either your architectural testimony for discussions of the garbage potentially, and as part of your traffic engineering testimony showing the vehicles, including the specifics of the township's ladder truck.
Yeah, and we will provide operations testimony as well.
Okay.
That will include.
Those
items.
auto turn drawings and the garbage discussions. Thank you.
I think you answered my second question regarding the upper loop. Typically 24-foot wide is for two-way access. You have one-way. Just wondering why it's so wide. I know you did move it back, I guess, that last application to be 30 feet off the property.
Yeah, there was
But it's within that landscape buffer, and again,
well, for vehicle circulation.
it's a one-way drive.
Yeah, but you're getting, FedEx trucks, an SU-30 through there, so it's not just a car.
You anticipate parked cars within that lane, because typically 24 is for a two-way drive aisle.
That's not necessarily the case. I mean, if it's, if you have a drive aisle around a business or anything, I mean, 30 foot's something I use a lot on commercial sites or any other site. So 24, if you have perpendicular parking, you're correct. That is RSI's requirement. We have a wider drive aisle there. It is one way, but we're circulating vehicles through there. So you need a wider drive to do that.
Just asking that the buffer be increased through the front of the property to it's very close, to the roadway.
We can look at it. We do meet the buffer requirement. We are outside of the buffer.
Understood.
If I may ask a question, Mr. Savage, what would a minimum aisle width be that would be acceptable to you? I mean, I know you designed
Well,
it.
I mean, it depends. I would have to look at the truck circulation. So in the one way, you could go down to 20, which is generally the minimum a fire department would want. However, if you're trying to circulate a certain size vehicle through that area, because of the turning maneuvers of that vehicle, you may need wider than 20. So we can look at those truck circulation plans again and see if we can reduce it a little bit, but we needed that width because of the turning of the vehicles up there.
Thank you.
Can I just add something to that? I know there was discussion about the width of this also for vehicles dropping off, like Uber Eats, Uber pickups and things like that. So that's why we talked about keeping it wider. So that stayed on site rather than jumping off site.
Yeah, and that's why I'm asking, because there could be a painted area of no parking if there's cars intended to be parked while they're going inside for drop-off, or other cars parked in front in close proximity to Sunset and the properties across the street. It would be to the benefit to clearly indicate that on the plans that it's a no parking area or a drop-off zone. And since there's a specific drop-off zone you mentioned was the lower parking lot, that should be used in lieu of parking on top for deliveries.
If I may, I would suggest that this is something that would be for an applicant's traffic engineer, and that the traffic engineer would be able to and should indicate where it would be marked no standing, no parking, where they would expect staging areas for such delivery vehicles, as well as the township's ability to enforce any signage on the offsite premise. But that would be not from this witness, I think.
Disagree with it. Other item we talked about circulation around the property and the slopes of the property. It appears that there are a lot of regrading areas that would provide swales. You would have areas of erosion. I don't know if you've done a erosion analysis on the slope of the swale going to some of the, again, this is to drainage, but you were talking about grading around the site.
Yeah, I mean, the swales there, we would typically run North American green through there to look at stability, which we've done. And just a reminder, this is going through soil erosion approval, so that's who has, that's one of their main focuses, is look at soil erosion. So we do have swales. The slopes on some of those swales looks a lot worse at that scale than some of those areas are. The areas that are steeper, we can provide calculations that if need be for stability.
Thank you.
Please come back to the next meeting.
Robert Blitz, 12 Stillwood Parkway. I have two questions, one for Mr. Savage and one for, not sure if I have the name right, Mr. Encino or Endicino. Mr. Blitz, B-L-I-T-Z. Mr. Savage, this is for the approval of a site plan, I believe. So a site plan, I would believe, shows what goes on the site specifically. When you were talking about the area where you said something with the word believe or presume, it was something of that sort, where trucks would come in, circle around. I know it was the word, I think envision is the word they used. They're probably envisioning using that for trucks to come in. Use some sort of word of that sort.
Yeah.
So here's my question though. Should a site plan have specifically the spot designated for what that area is versus saying that probably would be used or that would be envisioned to be used?
I think the point I was making is that there are two driveway areas there, both of which could be utilized for those purposes. The architect will be coming up, talking about the operation or the mailroom and things like that, which would dictate where certain activities would occur.
I understood what you said. I'll ask a question for the attorney now. In the site plan itself, at this stage of submitting the site plan for approval, is it your legal opinion that that area needs to be designated now? I understand that testimony will take place later, but shouldn't the site plan show for each area of the site how it is going to be used on the site? Or does that mean you have an incomplete plan if you don't dictate where that area is?
My legal opinion is that the site plan needs to comply with the redevelopment plan, which is the ordinance that governs this application. So long as the site plan complies with the redevelopment plan, then that's sufficient.
Am I allowed to ask a question of the board or no? Okay, I have a second question. You understand, Mr. Endicino, the difference between the words opinion and fact. So I have a question for you. Earlier on, you testified something along the lines.
Excuse me, this is an opportunity to question witnesses and not to cross-examine the applicant's attorney, so.
You're presuming that I'm cross-examining,
Well,
so I appreciate you letting me finish the question, but you tell me whether it's inappropriate.
It is inappropriate to ask the attorney a question. Now, the witness, Mr. Savage.
That's all I need to know. If I can't ask him a question, that's all I need to know. I thought I was allowed to do both, so that's fine.
No, that's how it started, no.
Okay, that's fine. I appreciate that. That's all I have for right now.
Hi, Maria Squilanti, Squilanti, 6 Belclair. My question is regarding the fence. Will the fence surround the entire property?
The fence, the limits of it's not, it doesn't extend the entirety of the property. The existing fence and area I was referring to was down here along that cliff. So the entire property is not fenced.
And the fence, you mentioned it would be, that there is an existing fence, so you would leave that fence there. Or you would, I guess, replenish the fence with more of the same fence?
So there's a couple sections along that side of the site where, based upon the development, the path of that existing fence had to be regraded or some such change there. So there are sections along that side where we're replacing the fence with new fence of the same kind and height, et cetera, of what's out there now.
And what's the purpose of that fence?
There's, as I mentioned, there's a very steep slope.
So the
on that
fence
side.
will keep the land from eroding?
No, fence has nothing to do with erosion.
So it would be?
It's a
keep people
safety.
And what does the fence look like now?
I mean, it's a chain link fence, varying conditions, but it's a chain link fence. It's not a privacy fence.
Okay. Because when I look at that fence from Rockledge, it looks like sticks with wires across, kind of like what you would keep outside of a very primitive rustic farm. So I'm wondering if that's the type of fence that you're going to have facing outward.
I mean, I can look at that particular area, but the fence that I'm referring to is a 6 foot or higher chain link fence that runs along, the area down in here. We can look at that other area, but I think if there's fence that's not in a good condition there, we could replace it, but there's no intent to put up a new fence in those areas.
Yeah.
Ms. Squilanti, one sec. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Mr. Savage, the fence that runs behind the proposed site that basically keeps people from falling off the cliff also follows around along Bloomfield Avenue, because there's a cliff there too. All along Bloomfield Avenue, there's basically a split rock wall that goes up to the property, and there's a really rusty, horrific looking fence. I'm just letting you know, it's a chain link fence that looks like it's been there for
Yeah, I mean, if
80 years.
Yeah, I mean, if there's sections of that fence that's in poor condition, then the applicant would to replace those sections that are.
It's a safety issue, really, more than anything else. So that this is not, we're not looking, I'm not screaming about aesthetics, although Ms. Squilanti may very well be. I'm just talking about that the fence is in very poor condition, and I would definitely agree with the person who's asking the questions.
Well, and we agreed.
You would agree to replace the fence?
Replace the fence that's in poor condition, yes.
Okay.
Would we have pictures of that? Would that be part of the site plan, or is that more?
That we typically wouldn't be part of the submission. I would assume you know that fence, and we can.
That could be part of, that, the board can request that be part of the site plan, absolutely. The type and the type of the fence, the size of the fence, the board can certainly request that as part of the application.
I guess that can be requested. It's, a lot of that existing fence, is located within Montclair, in large portions of it, but it certainly can make a suggestion towards the fence. I mean, it's, whether it's chain link or something else.
That's not up to me, that's up to the board.
No, I'm just answering your question.
It certainly can be.
I think it's a safety issue. This has nothing,
Yeah,
I'm
well,
talking about the aesthetics. The residents of your building are going to see it more than I will.
Madam Chair, we'll agree that there will be a safe fence that will be, if it's not there now, safe, it will be installed. There will be installed to be a safe fence in the same areas that there is fencing now.
So who should I listen to, you or Mr. Savage?
I'm representing as the attorney for the applicant that we will agree to that.
So what are you, you're
approval.
agreeing to what? As a condition of approval that you will propose to replace portions of the fence or
We will
replace
ensure that the fence is safe, and those areas of the fencing that are not safe will be replaced.
What do you want to say?
Well, Mr. Casino, I can't recommend that the board accept that because that's entirely subjective.
We will do that in consultation with the board engineer.
Right. Now, the board generally, in past applications, has asked for a depiction, a rendering of the fence so that the board can approve it, because that certainly is site plan. So I think, in representing this board, I think the board would like to see a rendering size where on the property.
I think the testimony is the fence was in Montclair, so the board's going to have limited jurisdiction in terms of what it can.
Well, it's not all in Montclair.
And also, could we not require a new fence within town limits on
Yeah,
the backside of the property?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, we can, just to be clear, on the site plans, the detail of that fence, that chain link fence is provided.
It's chain link.
It's the sections that we're going to be replacing are chain link. If there's other sections that need to be replaced, that are different material, we can replace that in kind as
It needs to be
well.
presented for the board's approval. It certainly is within the board's jurisdiction.
It's on the site plan.
Okay.
And I think the reason I brought it up, not just for the aesthetic value, is also because it seems that the site looks very nice for the people who are living inside it. But the people who are surrounding that site are going to get the raw end of the deal, and that's why we're here. The other question I had was regarding the ball field that was up there and the basketball court that you mentioned. You mentioned a basketball court and a ball field. Is that a basketball court with two courts?
That is a basketball court that's going to be removed.
Does it currently have two courts?
I believe that's
Is it a full basketball court?
I think that's a half court.
So it's a half court, so. And what about the field, the ball field that you mentioned? Is that a football field, a baseball field, a
I don't know
soccer
what
field?
it's not a.
I'm not done with my question. You mentioned a ball field, so I'm just wondering how large this ball field is, because the property is so steep. You're talking about a property like you're going to build this building and it's all there ready for you to be built on, but it's not. It's all so slow. We all know, we walk our dogs there, we walk around. It's so slopey. There is no field. What does this field look like? Please tell me.
There's an existing field on site if you go by.
Is it a soccer field?
It's just a field for little kids to play in. So
Like
it's not,
big-
I don't
is it
believe
like
it's a
a
regulation.
grassy
It's a grass
knoll?
field.
Like how
level.
many feet is it? Give me an idea. I don't know.
It's on the
I don't
plan.
have a
You can
degree
scale
in
up. It doesn't-
engineering.
I'm not
We're
sure
not
that-
utilizing it for the proposed
I'm not sure what the relevance of the question
I
is.
just want to know how big this field is that you're talking about.
Do you
Just
know-
like the
you
fence
don't know those-
that is not as nice as you're describing it. It's just this like sticks with wire around it like a chicken coop, and you're talking about a football field that's on the top of this site. But tell me how big this field is, and I will go away.
If you look at the plans there, that area down in here, right here is that area where the field is, and it's dimensionally, it's not marked out as a Little League softball field or a football field, it's just a field.
So like a very small field.
I don't
For small people.
Do you know what the dimensions are of the field?
Not allowed to
No,
say.
I
All
don't.
right, well, that,
We don't know what the dimensions are of the field.
you don't know the dimensions. Okay.
It doesn't, we're not, yeah. It's really, that area is being left as it is, so it's really, it's not a concern of this development, it's not something being utilized. So that area is right in this area, is that field. The vast majority of that's being left as it is in existing condition.
With regards to the fence, I just want to follow up on that so we know exactly what we're going to get. In my opinion, it would not be unduly burdensome to ask of the applicant between now and the next meeting to be able to indicate where it intends to leave existing fence or replace existing fence, and specifically what type of fence it proposes to install.
Just for the absence of doubt, can we just make the consideration you just replace the whole fence?
We just discussed that. The answer is yes, we will
Okay.
agree to replace the whole fence.
Thank you.
There we go.
I can't believe that there was that much consternation over really a simple issue that most of these applications deal with a little bit more easily, from my perspective. So at the next meeting, you'll bring a rendering of what fencing you're proposing. Thank you.
Well,
that'd be great.
We'll replace the entire fence with the fence that's on the plan now. That is our proposal.
So then bring a picture of a chain link fence.
The plans contain a detail of that fence already. It's already on the plans.
I don't mean to make light of it, but you're being just.
I will say that when we specify chain link fences, we typically specify whether they're a vinyl coated fence and what color they are. I'm sorry. When we typically discuss chain link fences at this board, we get more specific as to the material of the chain link fence, as to whether it's a standard galvanized fence or whether it's a vinyl coated wire, and if so, what color it would be.
That's provided on the plan.
That is currently provided on this current plan set. All right, thank you.
Is there anybody else from the public that has a question?
I'm Natalie Farrell. I'm at 43 Afterglow. I'm a new resident. Farrell, 2 R's, 2 L's. Quickly, where was the proposed area for a dog park? And secondly, is that exclusive to residents? Is that open to the public?
That dog park's down here, near that lower parking area, and that would be for residents of the development.
Tim Foster, 10 Afterglow. Do you have any perspectives, renderings of a frontal view?
That's questions of the applicant.
Are there renderings of,
Yes, the architect will be showing you those.
he will.
Yes.
What is the elevation of the garage relative to the existing elevation?
As mentioned, those plans will be coming up with the architect. Yeah. The elevations of it.
Are there any other questions for this for this professional? Thank you.
Yeah, hi, William Hatfield, 14 Afterglow, Hatfield. Mr. Savage, you had talked about the coverage on the property. What's the current impermeable coverage before the proposed development?
I'm sorry, you mean impervious? You said impermeable.
Impervious.
Impervious,
Yes.
okay.
And if you can identify for each lot and block what that is, for the present condition of the property, not on the proposed development.
So So the existing lot coverage on the full site we have is 27, just shy of 28%, where 75% is allowed, and we're proposing 40.6.
But you're counting all 8 acres, even those in Montclair, in that particular
Understood.
calculation? And I think you should
Yeah.
really just focus upon Verona.
We
since-
can provide that, it's.
My question was per lot and block, not the whole.
Yeah, we would have to provide that for the 3 lots. You're talking about for each lot, 3
Correct.
lots. Yeah, we'd have to do those calcs for 3 lots, but we're well under, even with just, as I mentioned early on, with just the lot within Verona, we're at 60% coverage where we're allowed 75.
And you're talking about that's just the building coverage, but not the hardscape, the paved areas?
No, that's lot coverage.
Yes.
So that's more than just, that's not building coverage.
Okay, what's the building coverage, of the current building coverage of the Verona lot versus what the proposed?
I mean, it's not we can calculate, it's not a requirement of the zoning to.
I'm just trying to understand what the
Oh, and I would
difference
have to
between the
calculate it.
current property is and what you're proposing, which we're entitled to as part of the site plan.
Yes, which is what, again, per the zoning, the requirement is lot coverage that I just provided you. It's not building coverage, it's not a requirement of the zoning. I can provide that.
And
It's
what's
just not
what's
something
the
we need.
percentage of the proposed coverage for building cover versus all hardscape? For just the Verona lot?
I would have to break that down. Again, the zoning for this lot does not have a distinction for building versus lot
Yeah,
coverage.
but I'm entitled, as I'm one of the closest, hold on, let me just ask my question. Thank you, Mr. Savage. I'm one of the closest properties to the south side on Afterglow, one of the 3 closest properties. I'm entitled to understand what the change is before it's approved by the board, and you should have that information as the expert testifying today available to us, so we have an understanding about what the change in the property will be, and you're not.
I just provided that to you a couple
Hold on,
times there.
Mr.
And what I'll do is I'll provide the calculation for a building.
Hold on. We will provide you with the answer that you are seeking at the next meeting. We do not have that information readily available now. We will provide it to you because you've asked, and you're a neighbor, and you're a resident, and we'll provide it to you. We're not obligated to provide it to you. We're obligated to comply with the requirements of the redevelopment plan. And the testimony has been very definitive that we do comply in that regard, not by a little, but by a lot. But we will provide you with an answer to your question because you're here, and we want to provide you with an answer to your question. We just can't do it at this particular
I appreciate
moment.
that. I appreciate that. I have a question also on the steep slope or the cliffs. So you testified a little bit about the existing conditions, but I didn't really hear about your testimony about how the existing conditions will change with respect to the slope. And I'm particularly interested on the Afterglow Avenue side. You've talked a lot about the steep cliff and that nothing's going to change in the proposed development on the Montclair side. We talked a lot about the fence, but you haven't talked about how the current slope on the south side, which is I believe it's the Verona Avenue side, I'm sorry, the Afterglow Avenue side would change. And you also talked about tree coverage. And there are a number of old growth trees on the Afterglow side, also around Sunset. And I didn't really hear whether they were all going to be removed. I've seen a lot of yellow tags on those trees. I'm assuming that means all those trees are going to be removed.
No, those tags were when the person was doing the tree inventory.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how they keep track of things. It's not an indication of keeping it or removing it. It's just a method of.
So on the plan, is the slope on the Afterglow Avenue side going to change? And I know my neighbor asked a question about the height of the garage. I'm trying to understand, because I'll be looking right at that structure, how that looks with respect to the height of the current trees and how that structure is actually going to be, let's just say, built into the existing slope? I know you said you have the setbacks, but actually how far is that off of the sidewalk there on Afterglow Avenue? Because there's a sidewalk that runs on that side of the property.
Yeah, the building setback on the Afterglow side is right around 62 foot, where the building setback requirement is 50. So we're 12 feet further back.
And what's the current building that's sitting on the property now? How far is that setback from Afterglow?
It's actually the driveway, sir.
It's okay.
The existing is further. I mean, the existing is from that side. The building itself is 247.
You know, it could be really helpful maybe before we get, I know you're going to be altering the plan. It would be helpful to have an overlay of the old property on top of what your current property is. And I've seen the overlays are pretty easily done so that the public and the board can get an understanding about how this actual property is going to significantly change as part of this development. I asked that you could provide that figure to us along with the calculations.
We can provide.
Thank you.
Yes, Chris Riley, R-E-I-L-L-Y. Since 60 Sunset Avenue. Since Mr. Savage brought up garbage, I'll ask him the question here. What about recyclables, and what about furniture that residents leave behind when they move out?
You know, that's actually an internal, the trash will be collected inside the building before it's moved out for pickup. So to answer probably one question, there's not an external trash enclosure. Any of the trash will be collected inside the building and then moved out on collection day.
It will provide you with an answer in regards to bulk items and recyclables.
Okay. And I'm not sure if this is a question for this witness or somebody else, but what about snow removal? What are you going to do with the snow when it snows 20 inches? Where are you going to put it? Thank you.
And
Do you plan on having an answer for that, or is that going to be your traffic engineer?
No, we can address snow removal.
Yeah, which engineer, which professional will be addressing it?
We will provide testimony with regard to snow removal in connection with operations. There's a few questions here that we're getting that are sort of under the guise of operations and management of the property. And so we may ask
okay.
The owner to address some of those questions at a later date. I'm compiling a list of the questions.
Greg Stewart, 45 Afterglow. Savage, I know the ship has already sailed and this is just conformed with an agreed to plan already, but just, you're saying 70% site coverage is what's allowed here? 75. What is it for the properties that surround it? Like the rest of the neighbors? What is this like?
If you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I was focused on the zoning for this property, allow 75.
Right? This is a high level of coverage.
It's a different zone. I mean, this, you got to remember, this site was rezoned for this specific development.
I think the
to meet
answer
all
is
the
he doesn't know
requirements.
what the lot coverage is in other zones. He just knows what it is for this.
100 property, it's for the R100 zone,
Everything around it,
35%.
35%, so
Yeah.
more than double. Thank you.
Dan Callahan, 15 Afterglow Avenue. As we're talking about the site plan and certainly the coverage here, I know aesthetics has come up. Which expert witness would be the right person to discuss the landscaping, the buffers to blend in the new building and the coverage with the
Well,
setbacks?
as we indicated, we have a landscape architect, Ms. Raker, and she will be testifying you know, either the same night or with the testimony with regard to stormwater management and green infrastructure, since there's a strong nexus between landscape architecture and green infrastructure. So,
Future date?
yeah, that would be a future date.
Been looking at a lot of these over the last couple of years. I can't help but feel it continues to get bigger. Would love to see the evolution of this from the original proposal to where we are now with the dog run and the pool. So I liked my neighbor's point of the existing building. It would be great to have the 4 or 5 different iterations and versions. Tonight was the first night that I heard we're actually going to have a sprinkler house down on Afterglow Avenue. I think that's a new iteration.
What do you mean by a sprinkler house?
I believe Mr. Savage referred to the building structure. Here you said there's a sprinkler building? No.
I think he said the buildings would be sprinklers.
Sprinklers, fire sprinklers. Sorry, I thought you were talking about irrigation.
No.
And as far as the driveways that have come up quite a bit, can we talk about lighting and how those driveways are going to be lit and the direction of those light bulbs to make sure they don't cascade off into the surrounding neighborhoods, houses, and driveways? I would love to know how we plan to.
Yeah, I mean, the lighting plan was submitted as part of the set, so the lighting for the surface parking and along the entrance drive would be pole-mounted lights. They're going to be facing in directions to have cut, and they'll have house shields or cutoffs to help prevent the light spillage from going
So the
out
light
towards.
goes down and not out.
Well, down and out, but not, you know, they can have cutoffs from the rear, more so now with the LED lights. And then there'd be bollards located in certain areas, more so in the amenity spaces. There'll be 3-foot bollards lighting, but the ones you'd be more concerned about would be, you know, for the parking areas and drive aisles would be a 15-foot, they're mounted at 15-foot poles.
Got it.
Downward facing lights.
Okay. And we're working on a date for that future with the landscaping and stuff like that? That's TBD for November, it sounds like?
Yeah, we'll discuss with the next days, but I just want to not create a false expectation. We're not going to have 5 iterations of plans that we're going to be showing. I mean, we're going to try to show as best we can existing versus proposed, and that's candidly so that the neighborhood can get a better sense as to what this is going to be, understanding that what is proposed conforms with the redevelopment plan. So the proposed is already been determined to be as of right under Verona's ordinance. But we want to be sensitive to the neighborhood in terms of providing you with what you've asked for, with some distinctions between current and future.
Mr. Savage, in your experience and history looking at projects like this, how often do you see them of this size in that R100 area? I can't help but notice apartment complexes now when I drive around everywhere.
Yeah.
He's a professional. He's testifying.
Well,
to
he
his experience.
didn't testify as to planning, and that's a planning question. What he has testified to is that the project conforms with the redevelopment plan.
Is there someone I can direct that question to?
No, we don't have a planner here because we're not seeking variances.
Got it. So it feels like we play a lot with just like SimCity models and iterations and setbacks. Like
no, there was
about circumferences of pipes and no like.
Yeah, there was a tremendous, and again, it's hard. There was a very involved and long process that extended over years, which I know the mayor and Councilman McElroy are aware of because they were part of it. In which this project was designed and conceptualized with the utilization of professional planners at that stage of the game to really plan this out. You unfortunately don't have the benefit of what occurred to get to where we are.
No,
but suffice it to say,
changed extensively.
Suffice it to say that there was an extensive process among professional planners, among the current owner, the applicant, and the municipality in terms of getting to a point where a redevelopment plan was adopted. And this is a reflection of that redevelopment plan.
Thank you.
I just wanted to follow up on the lighting question. So the parking garage will be the tallest structure, correct? And then will there be any lights at the top of that structure or anything illuminating?
That's a covered parking. There's not lights on the roof of that parking structure. It's a covered building.
Right, and the exterior, there's nothing that would illuminate?
I mean, there'll be some, the architect can cover like what I refer to as architectural lighting. There, like a small light next to a door, things like that aren't covered in my lighting. But my lighting is, the sidewalk, the streets and things like that. And the internal parking deck would obviously have lights inside of it in the ceiling, which are part of the building plans.
It's possible to ask a follow-up question that wasn't asked earlier, but it was asked in a specific question recently. You said lighting. Sure. Brian Conroy. So, question was about lighting. I know you have a lighting plan that shows the lighting photometrics. On the lighting plan, you have a model of a light that does not show a house shield. You mentioned that the lights would have a house shield. These are down lights. Is this the light you're intending to put within the driveway that's on your plans?
Yeah, I mean, those are down for the lights in terms of the directions of those. Are you looking for like a shield?
So
that's not how they're.
Typically because of the residential and the proximity, you would have a house shield which would block the light because of your property is higher than the roadway. So, the light is projecting out of the photometrics,
A lot of that's done with LED lights is having to do with the light diodes or whatever you want to call them, not a metal shield.
Typically, there's a metal shield, it's called a house shield, and you can look up any model.
We can look into that.
Mr. Conroy, what are you holding up, just for the record of what you're showing the witness?
This is from one of the plans, I believe it was on the civil plans, shows the lighting that's intended to be on their plans, that's intended to be per the lighting photometrics that are shown on his lighting photometric plan with the foot candles. And a follow-up question to that, and I know it's not your plan, it was on the landscaping plan, but the landscaping plan shows lighting on Sunset Avenue that's not consistent with the lighting shown on your plan, as I've highlighted in yellow below. Can you describe?
Like you mean a pole, or are you referring to a light?
That's a good catch.
Well, I've highlighted all the lights, they're not in the same position as your lights, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 lights called decorative street lighting, called out specifically on the landscape lighting.
Those, the lighting plan I prepared is the one that's the lighting that's required for this. So
I'll talk with our the landscape architect to coordinate our plans.
I guess for the resubmission, could it clearly be identified the type of lighting, the bollard lighting, the lights you're going to provide, and provide house shields?
We can provide the house shields. The plans have the specs of the lights, but if we need to revise it to indicate the house shield of some sort, we'll add that to it.
And I can provide photographs from my residents currently looking at the school, and the photon of the light, you can clearly see it. It's very irritating at nighttime, and I would hope that would be resolved this application.
Okay.
One more question, if I could.
Yes.
You talked about cross sections or geotechnical, I think, and maybe it's a geotechnical engineer, and you are providing more borings, I believe, in cross sections. But there is some rock that you'll have to excavate, and so I guess one of my follow-up concerns is there going to be a vibration monitoring plan or an environmental report, environmental assessment for that rock, the vibration. Typically, there's a PPV, particle per velocity, standards that you would have to follow. And if there's damage to my property because of vibration of rock excavation, I think that should be documented.
I think as mentioned earlier, whether it's a blasting or hammering out the rock, whatever that may be, is going to be subject to codes of the state, and whatever those requirements are, if that includes some sort of a pre-blast, that'd have to be done.
I guess I'm requesting, is there a plan that could describe whether there's, is blasting allowed in the town?
We haven't gotten to the point of that, the method of how the excavation on the site is going to be done yet, but it'll be in compliance with all the applicable regulations, whether it's a township or state.
I guess specifically what I'm getting at is disturbance or damage to associated properties due to blasting or excavation. Some type of plan to monitor to show that you're monitoring, and
Yeah, I
and
think-
if there's damage to properties, that there's something that can, be resolved.
We have a blasting ordinance. Our ordinance, I think it's 156, chapter 156. I'm not sure. That might have been what we proposed. Whatever the case, yeah, whatever the case, I would like to know if I'm right. It sets certain hours. It sets pre and post blast surveys within a certain square footage of the site, and I can't recall exactly what the square footage is, but it mandates the applicant to offer that to residents. And there's also notification, PSE&G notification, and no blasting hours of operation.
I just
So,
want to underscore something that the chairwoman said, because she worded it exactly correctly, and that is that the survey be offered. If folks do not permit the survey, then,
Yeah.
well, certain residents may not want
right,
a bunch of strangers in their
well,
house,
but if
regardless.
folks, it'll be offered. If folks choose not to permit the survey, then it's going to be harder for them to claim some sort of damage if they don't have a survey ahead of time.
Right.
And sir, the township code is linked off of the township's website, or I can show you that particular ordinance so you can read it. It's intended to be fairly strict and protective to residents, so hopefully it'll be satisfactory, but if you'd like to review it, we have it available.
Great, thank you very much.
And Mr. Conroy, there's also state regulations that they have to follow as well.
Yeah,
Yes, I understand, that's why I was asking about the particle velocity.
written in
Usually
1960
limits.
something.
Thank you.
Why don't we take a break at this point? Why don't we take a 10-minute break? I want to talk to two people. Thank you.
Well, Madam Chair, you have to wait for about a minute and a half.
I know, no, we won't
If it's too much, if there is a little, I don't think open grass, no, but generally there's too much snow that we can push the zone or some other spots in the lawn, like that, you can take it outside.
Did you want to meet with Greg and I?
No, I don't know what I just
It's right there.
Okay. Let's start.
No, Jack's got No, I don't. This is an answer to question. And that was Stan was the best. I'm going to be out of town the next month. I'm really not happy. Right in the sales and check to the church.
Okay, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. We back on the record?
Mr. Inglesino, please proceed.
Okay, at this point in the evening, I'd like to introduce Mr., well, I guess, has the public finished with questions of the engineer? I think that's where we left off.
I think the public, as well as the board, are going to get a lot of questions answered by the architect, who's going to address some of them, but sure, please come up.
Nora Brennis, 47 Afterglow Way. It's again, Brenneis. Again, it's a question sort of about the blasting. And again, I don't know if this is part of your domain, Mr. Savage, or again, somewhere else. A lot of the houses in the neighborhood are historic homes. My house is 120 years old. I'm not exactly right next door, but I'm close enough. Again, with the blasting, I know there might be a survey. Is this going to be like every house in the area, or is this only going to be just the surrounding homes that they might do a survey of the houses?
You know, as mentioned before, you know, with the town ordinance related to blasting or rock removal, there is a set sort of perimeter that you would have to do the testing within, that pre-testing, let's say, or inspection. So whatever blasting or any rock removal, again, it hasn't been determined yet if it's blasting or some other drilling it out. I mean, that hasn't been determined yet. But it would have to be in compliance with the township ordinance related to that type of work and the state regulations, so.
Okay, and one other quick question, and this is trees, and I know that might be landscaping. But again, just having lived in the neighborhood for 30 years, we had a situation with a house being built on Belle Claire where a lot of trees were taken down. And it changed the whole water situation of my own yard with getting water in the basement. So I'm wondering if when they take down some of these trees, are trees going to be replanted? And is that aspect going to be looked at again? Because I lived through it. I had a dry basement and I did not have a dry basement after that happened. Again, I don't know if this is your domain, but.
Well, we have submitted, I think, a tree removal plan, correct?
We have.
And is there a tree removal ordinance in Verona?
Yes,
and we will comply with the tree removal ordinance in accordance with our tree removal plan.
I will say this, that they submitted, a landscape architect submitted a plan for tree planting, et cetera. And Mr. Savage came up with his own independent plan that doesn't match hers. So that is something that we did ask for the numbers to be brought together and to jive.
We understand. We'll reconcile those.
Yeah, so, but they do have a plan to plant a number of trees.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And also, if I may, I've pulled up the township's ordinance on blasting. The radius for the pre-blast survey is 400 feet of the exterior lot or boundary line of the property on which the blasting activity shall be conducted, and a post-blast survey is also required.
Thank you.
Should we proceed with the architect, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Okay, at this time, Madam Chair and members of the board, let's call Mr. Jack Raker, who's project architect of Meadow and Wasco.
Get the drawings up here.
Okay, Mr. Raker, why don't you raise your right hand to be sworn in by...
Mr. Raker, I'd like to do first. Can you state your full name and address for the record so we know who we're swearing in?
Sure. My name is Jack Raker.
And your address, please?
Can you turn the mic on?
Sure.
Thank
My name is Jack Raker, 80 Lambert Lane, Lambertville, New Jersey.
And Mr. Raker, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Raker, would you please describe for the board your educational and professional experience, and please include any licenses that you possess?
Sure. I have a bachelor's degree in architecture from New Jersey Institute of Technology. I'm a licensed architect for the past 20 years. I've been developing projects just like this one for that period of time, and I've done testimony before hundreds of New Jersey towns, and I'm a New Jersey licensed architect.
And your license is in good standing?
It is.
Madam Chair, I offer Mr. Raker as a professional witness in the area of architecture.
Anybody from the board have any? Okay, please accept.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Raker, would you kindly describe the architectural components of the project for the board and the public?
Sure. I see that everybody's looking at a perspective view on screen right now. I'm going to show a much larger version of that later on. I don't mean to just go right off of it.
Are these directly from your plans as submitted, or did you colorize anything for this?
So this presentation is directly from my plans as submitted. There are some supplemental photographs that I've added of projects that I've done with this client that are of similar nature, and I'll present them and I'll point them out when we get to them.
All right. Yeah, please point those out so we can add those as exhibits.
Sure. So this is an exhibit that's in our plan. It shows the
various buildings on our site, and these buildings step up the grade. And one of the things we wanted to do with these buildings is, we don't want to just flatten the site, create a big giant retaining wall, and then put a building on top of it. There's a massive amount of disturbance with that type of construction. So we took great care to take these buildings and step them up the slope. There is one building that does have some subsurface. The garage does go from the lowest grade up to one of the middle grades, so it does have some basement, as you would call it, and I'll describe that as I go through the plans. The plans sort of show how the building steps up the hill, and I'll walk you through that. All of our buildings comply with the allowable building height. We're under the allowable 60 feet. What you're looking at here is the first level of the plan. This level is the level that fronts our entry drive. The entry drive that you're seeing. Whoops, excuse me, sorry, I hit the wrong button there.
We don't have copies of some of this.
You do have copies of this plan, it's just not colorized.
So why don't we mark that as Exhibit A4?
I agree.
That is the third page in the architectural set, it looks like, but it does appear.
So A4 is just a colorized version of A02?
Yes.
Can we get sent the colorized version via PDF?
I have actually a thumb drive with me that I can leave with the board, or I can print copies and bring them to the next meeting. That's
Email that to our board secretary?
perfect.
Thank you.
So as was discussed by Mr. Savage, this is our entry drive here that comes up. It is an oblong circle. Off that is our entry to our garage. You can see that now in this plan. Now that it's cut, you can see the entry to the garage here, and then surrounding the garage. These are dwelling units that surround the garage. There's a hallway that wraps, that gets access to those dwelling units. This is an areaway between those dwelling units and the garage itself. Down here is a lobby. This is our main lobby entry. To the right is some amenity, and to the left is some utility rooms and spaces and storage, things of that nature. Down to the right here is our main service areas. That's trash, electric rooms, things of that nature. So what happens in this building, there's a chute, a centrally located chute for trash. The tenants walk to that room, drop their trash or recycling, depending upon the chute, goes down to the lowest level where it's collected and compacted. Then that is carried through a service hallway. That room location is right here. And you can see there's a number of storage bins that are located in that location. That trash is then taken out down the service corridor and brought out here and brought out that hallway at the time of pickup. That time of pickup is scheduled. It's kept internal until time of pickup, the frequency of which depends upon the volume of trash that's created, whether the building's fully occupied or partially occupied, and that is fully managed and scheduled through the operations department of the developer. And that pickup is over here. So the trash truck would come down here. I'm going to talk a lot about where the trash truck or the UPS truck would go. Those questions will obviously be for the traffic engineer, but I'll just sort of lay the groundwork so that you could ask questions of him. So the pickup for the trash is down in this location where there is that parking area and that trash loading pickup. It's where the dog run was located on the site plan. Additionally, for UPS, FedEx, Uber, whatever kind of pickup and drop off, they would come up these main entry drive. They would stop here in front of the building, either pick up or drop off. The mailroom is located inside this main lobby. They would bring those items in and then get out and take off. My understanding, and as we work through the design, there's enough room here, but I'll let the traffic engineer discuss that, for any car to be parked or truck to be parked and people to continually circulate around. So this is the entry to the garage. The garage, as you enter the ramps upward, so this ramp continues up. To the left is the lowest level, and that's some parking areas down here. They have access through a doorway at this level. Every level of the garage has access to a corresponding level of the building. As the building steps up, There's a portion of the building that is at the upper levels. You can't enter directly into those levels. You'll have to go up to an elevator and take those levels up. When I get up there, I'll point those areas out. So you'll see that this is a nice lobby here. It's going to be a 2-story lobby. We've done these in a lot of locations. I'll take you to the next slide. This is a project that we've done with this developer, and it's a great 2-story lobby, a lot of nice amenity space. Usually there's fireplaces, casual seating, waiting areas in that lobby. You can see there's, in this photograph, you can see the balcony overlook, where we'll have that in this project, where you'll be able to walk and look down into that balcony. Lots of areas to sit and, and socialize. I'll take you to the next level. Next level mimics the lower level almost entirely, except now we have units that are almost contiguously around the project. This hallway runs contiguous. There is a corresponding garage level here that is continuously wrapping up, still below grade on this side, but being covered by units. So you can't see that garage from Afterglow Avenue and Sunrise Highway. It's being blocked by units, and this portion over here is below grade. You can see this area here sort of X'd out. That's the 2-story lobby. I'm going to go up to the next level. You can see as I progress through the levels, more and more of the project becomes visible. You can see here, these levels are now fronting an outdoor courtyard. This is a passive courtyard. I'm going to briefly talk about the uses of different courtyards. I'll show you some photographs, but extensive testimony will be given by the landscape architect. So you can see it's labeled, it's a passive courtyard. That means we're not going to have it like a pool is more of an active, a little bit noisier, active activity. In here, there's like grilling pits, places to sit, cook, and enjoy the outdoors, socialize. I have some photographs, I believe, of the exterior. Here's another project that we had done. This one's a little bit more hardscape because this one is on top of a parking garage, whereas the one we're going to have is actually at grade, so we'll have more ability to do planting. But it shows the type of features that are in these courtyards typically. Way at the back, you see a small grilling area with some covered areas, some small games that could be had that are outside, hardscape, for people to go out and enjoy the outdoors. We'll move on. This is the next level. Now at the next level, you can see this now patio is 1 story below this level, but the pool patio now is at this level. You can see this. There's a large amenity space here that fronts that pool. There's some units that wrap another plaza and courtyard that are there. There's also continuously the garage wraps up around the structure. And you'll start to see certain portions of the building will drop off once they reach the maximum 4 stories. So here's some typical amenities that we have in these structures. These are luxury apartments. One of the things these tenants demand is a high amenity level. We have, co-work space. A lot of times people are not commuting. They're not leaving the building every day and traveling to wherever. They'll work from home a couple days a week. So we provide lounge spaces, private spaces. They could sit almost anywhere they want in the amenity space and work, but this allows them some quiet if they need some quiet, make some phone calls and do things that don't disturb other people. This is a sports sort of gaming center, it's like virtual golf or virtual baseball, very popular with many of the tenants. Again, some grilling patios, outdoor grilling patios. Indoor, we have lots of TVs, places for people to gather. Pool tables are very common as well. And, these spaces get used heavily during big television events. People will gather rather than sit in their apartment. They go down and they socialize in the building as well. Okay, so now we've stepped up. You see this building here. It's stopped. This is the roof plan of this building below. these little boxes that you're looking at, those are the condensing units. Each unit has its own HVAC system. That HVAC system has a small condenser on the roof, just like a unit for any single-family home. It's a smaller one because we're not powering the whole house. We're heating and cooling a small apartment. So it's a small, like 42-inch, 3 by 18-inch condensing unit. And they're stacked up on the roof. They're sort of grouped together, and then the line sets are run down through the walls and into the various apartments. So you're looking at that roof of that building below. And then these are the units that continue up. Again, these courtyards now are below this level, these levels of units. You can see the stairwells. The building is fully sprinklered. All the means of egress. I remember there was a question before about fire access around the building. Not all buildings constructed in the world today have access all around, and the building code understands that. And when you don't have access around a building, the building code makes you they restrict you with their fire separation. So there's greater restrictions on this building because I don't have the access around to make the building more safe inside, whether it's more fire areas, more stairwells, and that's handled through the building code. And this building complies. And again, you can see the garage. I believe this is the last level of this garage, but I'm going to move to the next. Yeah, no, this is the top level of the garage and the additional units that are around here. I'm going to continue on. The next slide is going to look almost identical, except we just gray out the background a little bit more. This is additional levels of that upper building, and then the roof plan of the upper building, which looks very similar to the roof plan below. We've grouped all of our mechanicals. They will not be seen. They will not be viewed. Parapet hides all of that from view. And if there are any other mechanicals that are closed for whatever incident, we screen them with a screening. I'm going to move on to the next slide. These are some typical unit plans that we have in the project. The open floor plans, all well amenitized, hard surface floors, all either granite or solid stone countertops, stainless steel appliances. These are very well done. I'll show you some photographs after these, but you can see on some of the corner units that we open up that outside corner so that when you walk into this unit, you get these two walls with windows on it. Really opens up the plan, something that a lot of people really like. But the standard inline units are here, and they all have their own. It's a 2-bed with 2 bathrooms, open kitchen, living and dining, something that's very popular with a lot of people today. On this page, we're also showing some of our signage. We do have a monument sign here that is shown and dimensioned, which complies, and then we have some signage above the doorway to mark the entry of the building, all of which complies with the ordinance. Here are some photographs. Again, these are units that we have done with this developer, very well appointed. You can see the kitchens, stainless steel countertops, stainless steel appliances with these, I believe, are granite countertops, although from this distance it's hard to see. They could be quartz. Whoops, there we go. Sorry, I'll get to this one. I know everybody wants to see the view, but and then very generous open spaces, bedroom, living, and dining spaces.
Would they be the affordable units also?
Yes, they don't treat the affordable units differently, other than they may be sized differently, but they're pointed the same.
What floors are they going to be on?
I can go back. We distribute them throughout the project, so we don't stick them all in one area. We try to distribute them throughout the project. You wouldn't know. If you lived in the apartment, you wouldn't know which apartment is affordable. Maybe if you walked in, you might say, "Oh, this one feels a little smaller than mine," but the same access to everything.
Are they the ones that are listed as dash A?
There's dash A.
And why did you not include the floor plans for those in the site plan?
I could include the floor plans for those. We have many floor plans for those as well.
Okay.
They look very similar to the others, they're just a little smaller.
And then my other question on it is, why are the 3 bedrooms so small compared to the rest of the 3 bedrooms are 975 square feet. I mean, it's 20% smaller than your average 2-bedroom market rate apartment. It's a pretty tight fit for a family of 4.
They're, you know, the code does not restrict you in size of your apartment.
I get it.
And I can tell you.
It might not be code, but the whole impetus with this was for affordable housing. I mean, why not take a 1,200 square foot 2-bedroom and make that a 3-bedroom, and take the 975 square foot 3-bedroom and make that a 2-bedroom? That'd be much more comfortable to live in.
No, I mean, I can tell you that I've designed many of these co-units, and as a person,
Have you lived in one?
Yes, I've actually lived in units smaller than the COA units. I happen to live down in Lambertville, New Jersey, and I've lived in town and bounced around in some of those apartments, and much smaller than the 975. I would love to have had an apartment that big.
Well, Mr. Raker, in your experience, 3-bedroom COA units, are the sizes proposed in this project consistent with what you've designed in other projects?
Very consistent, all across the state and New Jersey.
Thank you.
I mean, it's consistent, but why not make the other ones bigger?
I mean, I would guess that, you know, Fair Share understands that they want these units to be distributed amongst other units. So they understand the burden that they're putting on the developer, so they allow you to make them the size that you want.
I mean, real estate development gets very favorable treatment, both in the tax code and based on the regulatory regime in the state. I think that, you know, kind of meeting us halfway here and making the apartments a little bit bigger would go a long way. It's my opinion.
I mean, we could look at sizing some of them up a little bit.
Yeah, I think seeing those floor plans with the affordable units.
Sure, we will provide the floor plans before the next meeting.
The location of a lot of them, they're irregularly shaped compared to some of the other larger units.
Sure, that's understandable. Okay. So what you're looking at here, this is a perspective view. It's generated, we have the building modeled, we have the site and area modeled. We generated it across Sunrise, looking back toward the entry of the building. So if I were to take you to the plan. Oh, I'm sorry, Sunset. I apologize.
So is that a view from Sunset?
It is a view from Sunset.
Are there trees missing from that?
There are not.
There are not?
There are not. And let me just show you where that's being taken from. So we're looking, we're standing right over in this area here. So we're looking right across the drive aisle. So there are no trees in the drive aisle located. So we're almost taking this vantage point from the area that you will get the most visibility of this building.
I mean, my understanding was, see that whole area that you cut into to make the donut-shaped driveway there?
This area here?
Yes.
I'll point that out to you in the perspective.
It's not in that perspective.
It isn't. This area here?
Treeless. It's treeless.
This buffer area.
Well,
I'm going to let the landscape architect talk about whatever the landscaping there. But I can show you the rendering. So this is the drive coming off of Sunset, right here. This is the landscaped area that we were just looking at, right in here. The entry drive circle is right up in this area. The garage entry is right there. And the main entry to the building is right here. So you drive up, you drive around the circle here, come back around this way. This is the landscape. The grade changes. So as you go up this drive, it's changing. So you can see this is landscaping here that is effectively landscaping that bermed area right there.
So, Mr. Riker, if we have questions about the landscaping, should we ask you or should we wait for the landscape architect?
This is an illustrative representation that has been coordinated with the landscape architect, but I'm going to let them discuss the types of plants and the types of landscaping.
Are you unsure as to whether there's going to be trees? Are you unsure? That's my question.
In my understanding, as we were generating this view, there are no trees in this area. If there have been changes that I'm not aware of after this rendering was done, then I'll let the landscape architect answer that question.
I would nudge the landscape architect and say, I'm a nudge. I'll admit that right now, but I would really like to see trees in that area. That just, I mean, that's just.
If we're commenting on this now, I would like to make a comment on this.
I don't know.
Are we going to do landscaping now, or are we doing?
No, we are not doing landscaping. This witness has been testified as the architect. There are some illustrations architecturally, which he has indicated have been coordinated with the landscape architect, but he is not vouching for the landscape architect.
Then he shouldn't be testifying to the landscaping. That's my point.
I'm going to say, I just want to let you know that my intent is to talk about the building, and if I put a bunch of trees in front of it and try to talk about the building, you would probably look at me very suspiciously.
I would just like to add, sir, that if you look at her landscape architect plans that I know you're not testifying on behalf of, on L101, there are a number of trees depicted in that area. So I don't know if you're saying there aren't, you're not sure that there will be trees, that's fine. But I think she forgot to add something to your depiction.
She may have updated her plans after I did this.
Okay.
We're all moving
That's great. Sorry about that. Yep.
And again, the purpose of this is to show the building.
Yeah, and I want you to focus on the building and not on the landscaping, and if needed, we can generate a rendering with the correct and proper landscaping that will show you the landscaping and focus on that.
We turned your mic off so you can keep your mic back.
Sorry about that. Okay. But I want to point out, the style of architecture and what we've done to mitigate some of the size of this building. When you look at it from here, it is a very large building, but when you look at the way we've broken up the mass of the building by using materials, and these are high quality materials. We're using brick and hardy and metal panel, very high quality materials. And then you notice that we run the brick up to a certain height, then we drop it down, brings your eye down. We create bumps and jogs in the cornice line and pulling out different elements so that you're not looking at one long mass of a monotonous structure. We've done I think a very good job. Oops, I apologize. Tom. I'll keep speaking while he's logging in. But what we've done is we've tried to break up the mass of the building by utilizing a variety of materials and a variety of colors and materials. And we've done that by changing the color of the materials at the top. You've noticed we've changed the top portion. We haven't run the brick all the way up and all the way down, but we do undulate the brick. We change materials. We've added bays and balconies. We're manipulating the cornice up and down to break up the mass of the building. And then we've created a very elegant entry with two-story glass. We've done that two-story entry that you can see there. And then, just created this great language, we feel. Very proud of this building, a great language that I think helps break up the mass of the building. So with that, I did go through my testimony. I just want to hit a couple of things that I need to add. We have a total of 200 dwelling units, 92 one-bedroom units, 105 two-bedroom units, and 3 three-bedroom units. And yes, the 3-bedroom units are affordable, and we'll provide those affordable layouts next time we come in.
I think it was alluded to that you were also going to provide us with elevations going around the building You're not testifying to it, but I believe you will be asked, so you may as well just tell us.
I wanted to do that. I know everybody was waiting for that perspective. We have elevations, and, you know, the thing about elevations is you never see a building in elevation. You just never look at it that way. But you can see, go back. Now, here's the front porch. So, yeah, sure. So,
Is this from Bloomfield Avenue looking south and north?
this is the north building elevation. It is the what would be the afterglow elevation, this elevation here.
Jack, speak in the microphone generally.
Sorry.
to the-
So this right here is the afterglow elevation. The elevation below here, this is the entry elevation. So if this is the entry circle here, and the drive up. So yes, that would be Sunset. And then we have two more, the back elevation, which is here at the bottom. And then the elevation stepping down the hill here.
So do you want to, I mean, you're welcome to approach the map there or the screen and just describe, if you could, where we are looking.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And what, yeah, and what the elevations.
There's a handheld one right there. Just make sure it's on.
Okay. So this is the northern building elevation. This is the elevation that is the afterglow elevation. So this is the portion of the building that's closest. You see we've shaded this area here. This area is as it steps back. This is the building up on the right. This is the building map. You're looking from the top, looking down. So afterglow is up here, sunset is over here, and Montclair is over here. So the elevation you're looking at is from the top looking down. So you're seeing this in the foreground, that in the foreground is this section here. This in the background, that's this section way back here. And then way in the back, you see the upper building, that's this building back here at the back.
It appears that we're seeing essentially the side of the parking garage there in the top building. Is that correct? Is essentially the center of your top
right
rendering?
Here, this edge right here is the bit of the parking garage that steps above the roof line here. This portion right here.
Is there also?
The garage is.
We know we're trying to let you, but we gotta keep it.
There'll be a time where you're going to be able to ask all of these questions, but yes, if you could please describe where the garage is and the finish of the building behind it.
So the garage sits right here. As it ramps up, there's a higher portion over here, and that higher portion sits in the back up against this building, and that's what you're seeing shaded back in here.
Okay, the building that we're seeing behind the parking garage, that wall looks very sort of unadorned. You talked about the rhythm and the material mixture. Are we simply not seeing that in this rendering, or one material there?
This is currently shown as one material, this material here.
Okay. Will that be visible from the ground at any point?
I don't believe so. With the proximity of this building, the afterglow, this building will block in perspective view anything you see for the garage in that building.
How about from anywhere off-site or neighboring properties?
Well, I have not studied every property in the area, so I can't answer that question in the view from every property.
Okay. That would be an interesting question as to whether or not you're going to see the parking deck, mechanical equipment, an unadorned wall, et cetera, from, particularly if there's any neighboring residential properties that are looking at that elevation. I'd be very curious.
Well, mechanical equipment, Jack, can you talk about the mechanical equipment again? I thought you said that was not going to be visible.
None of the mechanical equipment will be visible at all.
But we do see, as I said, an unadorned wall and part of the parking deck, so I'm curious, if that is going to be visible from anywhere off-site.
And that's something, because it would take such an extensive study to put cameras everywhere in the surrounding area, it would be very difficult to answer that question. When you think about perspective and how you see things, if you say, what is when you see it from afterglow, that's a very definite set of points that I can check. But if you say the entire area,
Mr. Egger, do all of the dimensions that you're showing up there in that exhibit, do they all comply with the requirements of the redevelopment plan?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So this lower view, the south building view, this is the view essentially from Montclair at the upper level of the building. And you're seeing back, and what we've tried to do with these elevations is so we've shaded different areas because it's not, you're not getting, the elevations are deceiving if we color them all the same way and it's all one color. So what we've done is we tried to shade the areas that are further back so you get an understanding of what's further back and what's up close.
Maybe you want to turn the sleep off.
So, when you're looking here from this side, you're seeing the shaded area. That's this back wall here. These areas that are pronounced in color, that's the areas that are closest to you. This area here, that's pronounced. You can see we've shown this very light in the background. That's this area back here. So this view here, this is the view from this side. This is the parking garage.
Can you say which streets
This is
we're viewing from? Because you just said over.
So it's not Afterglow or Sunset or Montclair. It's the view from.
It's my backyard.
So this gentleman's backyard is this. This is the view here.
No, Afterglow, the overlook, or.
You don't know.
It's the private road overlook. It's the south side.
It's the only side of the property that doesn't have a street.
So.
Yes, it is the only side of the property that does not have a street.
It's a street, it's overlook.
It's Overlook Terrace would be the name.
Okay.
I guess the closest street, yes, would be Overlook Terrace.
I know, yeah, we have to, but I am asking you, and you didn't have the answers.
I don't know the closest street to this side of the building.
Guys, from the public, please don't call out right now.
Sorry.
It's not time for public comment or public questions. So please just hold off for now.
So what you're looking at here, this is this area with the greatest color saturation. That's this element here. In the background, you're seeing the garage. It's a very small portion of the garage. And then you're seeing adjacent to the garage, the end of the units down in this corner. This is the view of the entry and the garage entry. That's the view from Sunset, and that is the elevation that is closest to that view. So you can see this is essentially the garage, the trash pickup area, the area that is closest down to the parking area. That's this area here. And as this fades off a little bit, you're getting this, you see the entry drive, which is right here, comes around. The garage entry is located here. And then the building entry, there's a wall that heads back. The building entry is there. And then you're looking at the building that's up above in the back. That's shaded the most. So that's essentially the building elevations. But all of the techniques that you saw in the perspective, the bays, the brick, all of them two-dimensionally, you can't see them in elevation because they're popping towards you in elevation. Elevations are inherently flat. But all of those elements are on these elevations as shown in that perspective rendering. The same, you can almost identify them. You see these bays that are popping up, they appear on every elevation. And they're the same in the perspective as they are here. All of our buildings comply with the allowable building height.
I'm sorry, comply with?
The allowable building height of 60 feet.
At this time, I'll ask the board to go ahead and ask the gentleman questions. Go ahead, Jack.
Sure. I asked a question before of the engineer, and he kicked it off to you, Mr. Raker. In the southwest corner, the furthest point, it's basically opposite the Sunset Afterglow corner of the building. I saw on the elevation charts that there's an elevation of 573, and the terrain back there is somewhat flat till you get to the Montclair border, and then it looks like 15, 20 feet later, that's when it drops off to the steep slope. My question is, excavation in that corner, that is where I asked, is there going to be a basement below that area? At that 573 is, I know there's can't be an apartment below grade, but is there a basement? My question is, how far down at that point are we excavating along that Montclair border line?
So just to be clear, I want to make sure I'm answering, is this the corner you're?
Microphone, please.
Just to be clear, I want to make sure.
Yes.
Is this the corner you're referring to?
Yes, it is.
These areas are slab on grade.
Okay.
So let me just show you what happens as I go backwards here. You'll see these units will drop out. Whoops, went the wrong way there. I'm going to go one more.
So I understand how they're tiered upward.
Right,
but at that level, there's probably, at the front of the building, there's probably 3, maybe 4 stories below that. But at that back corner,
it's actually 1 story. Let me get to that section. Unfortunately, there's pictures between.
Yep.
So this is the level that fronts this side, and it touches grade. There are no units here. What happens is the building steps up, and then units appear here at grade. This will be a slab on grade. There is no basement.
Yeah, so how far down, if you're putting a 4-story building above that, how far down do you excavate into that rock?
How far down do the footings go?
How far down? Bottom of footing?
Typically, now, the footings currently are undesigned, so we are not at that level of design yet. And, you know, in conjunction with the geotech, we'll get a structural engineer on board, and we design the footings. And if there is shallow bedrock there, those footings can go down to that shallow bedrock and be supported on that. If we have 3 feet, they're required to go down 3 feet.
Okay. And I'm asking this because I want someone from your side, a professional, to put this on record. My worry there is the proximity to that cliff behind it. And should you be blasting, how secure is the rest of that rock? Because once it starts to drop off, there's residents in Montclair, I'm sure they're not here, or maybe some of them are. How secure is that rock ledge that doesn't start to collapse? And I am asking this question because a year ago in West Orange, that happened when there was in front of a development that went on 4 years prior. So how secure is that rock ledge? How many tests do you plan on doing along that rock ledge to make sure that these people are safe?
So as far as the geotechnical questions, I cannot answer them. But I can tell you the way we've developed this site is we've kept everything shallow by stepping the building. And it's something that, you know, I'm very proud of how this building is designed into this slope. And it is no small feat. It is not something that's easy to do, to get all of these elements within these buildings to work, whether it's trash or hallways to access every element. It is a real challenge to work on a sloping site. And, you know, we have accomplished it here, and we've accomplished it in such a way that we have some very small amount of basement area, and most of it is at the lower building, where it's just starting to go into, and we need some areas where we got to get access for trash and things of that nature. And the garage itself, which can only ramp at a certain speed, so it needs to ramp at that speed, and it dictates those levels of excavation. But all of these areas back here that you see against that steep slope, they're all slab on grade.
Okay, so are you saying that to build this, and this is why I went to the engineer first, you'll be digging down, if you hit bedrock at 4 foot, you pour right on bedrock and that'll be your footing? Is there a chance that blasting won't be needed?
So I defer that type of question for the structural engineer. Whether there's blasting needed is undetermined at this moment. But I can tell you our footings are, like I said, our building is slab on grade, so our footings are shallow. Now, if there are areas that were excavated and then we need footings, they have to go down to solid earth. But we can't just backfill and put a footing on top of it. So
you get the bedrock.
Following up with Jack's question, if nobody minds, underneath the garage, right? And I'm talking the 6-story, I think it's 6 different level parking, right? Underneath that, there's going to be areas where the stormwater basin is planned to go. How far below grade is that? Can you tell me that?
I don't know how far below
existing grade.
I don't know how far below existing grade the stormwater is.
How far below grade would the first level of the parking deck be?
I could answer that question, but I would need to go to the topography map and the topographic map that the engineers generated, and check what the level of that.
Could you bring those numbers next time?
I can bring those numbers.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I didn't know,
Okay.
that you'd be asking.
That's why I said there's going to be elevation questions, and since you're the architect, you're going to be the guide. So perhaps we could be more prepared for those sorts of.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, can you repeat your question again?
My question was, in relation to existing grade, what is the grade of the parking garage first level? And then I also wanted to know the elevation of the installation of the stormwater management tank below that proposed elevation, and again, in relation to the existing, where it's supposed to be installed on site. And I believe that there'll be questions like that about different other important areas on that site. So perhaps you could sort of do just to answer the questions more so than to tell us how you're going to prepare the site. That's not necessarily the question. I think we all know what that answer might be, but just so that we have an understanding of how that site's elevations are going to change and what we're not going to see, et cetera, et cetera. Is that okay, Mr. Inglesino? Fair enough?
You understand the question?
Oh, yes, and I can.
Okay, great.
I'll select some areas where I think it's, maybe deeper, and some areas that I think are more shallow.
So I will assume that if before we open up to public and this board finishes, that you'll be returning so that we can get a little more information from you. That would be great. Does anybody have?
I actually have another question.
Go ahead, sure.
On your plan on A2, I don't know if it was missed on your part, but in prior testimony, we were told that you were having electric, water, and I believe gas connections off of Sunset and also off of Afterglow. And I see on the plans here, your utility rooms are only on Sunset side. You have them off of that driveway. Is there an area or another utility room you're adding, or do you need to add on the Afterglow side?
Give me 1 second. I believe there is. I'm just going to check my plans.
Okay.
I believe we put it under the stair tower. Did we lose it? I got hard copies, so I'll answer that question.
Mr. Inglesino, for the record, it's going to be A4 as A2 through A12.
Okay.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Turn these pages in. Pointer, and at this level, which is an upper level, it's in section 3, it would be the first floor plan for that section. So that area is right here. It's right next to the garage. It's right here. It's actually the basement level of the building above. There's a basement area here, so that would be the utility area coming off of that. And right now we're showing water, sprinkler, and storage at that level.
Sir, getting back to the garage for a moment.
Say 4. Yeah.
Can you let us know what the parking counts are in terms of for the residents versus the for guests?
Sure. We have, in the garage, we have a total of 382 spaces, where I believe 382 are required, but we do have surface parking, and I'm not entirely sure of that count. I'd have to let the civil engineer answer that, the surface parking count.
And the access to the garage, is it going to be gated?
The garage will be key carded, so residents will come up. It'll either be some type of fob on their car where they'll, as they approach, the door just automatically opens. For
So
them.
guests will not be able to access the garage at all?
No, but we do have some on-site parking that the guests will be able to access.
And do you know the height of the garage entry?
The entry height of the garage entry, by code, it has to be a minimum of 8 foot 2 inches. So I will say it will be at least that.
Okay, because I think an ambulance is about 9 to 10 feet high, so.
We would not bring ambulances.
You would no ambulance
into
access to the garages at all?
Absolutely not, no.
So if there was an emergency in there, they could not
would show up at the
access
front
that?
door. They would show up at the front door and be told where to go. I mean, they're.
Down the elevator, or?
Yeah, they would probably be escorted to whatever apartment would be.
Well, I'm more concerned about if somebody was hurt in their car, or they had a heart attack in the garage level, how would they get access into there? But you're saying they would have to go through the front door, down the elevator?
Yeah, to
into
the
garage. Okay.
garage door. Absolutely.
And in terms of the mechanical equipment in the garage, like everything subsurface, if you have stormwater in the garage, I'm assuming you're going to have pumps to get the stuff out of the basement area and into the municipal stormwater system.
We're not addressing.
No, but it's not a stormwater issue, but it is an architectural issue where.
I can tell you that if you look at the garage, there's a lot of.
Well, here, let me get to the basis of my
Sure.
point here, is that if you're going to have mechanical equipment where you're going to be pumping out the stormwater, are you going to have an emergency generator on site?
Well, again, I don't believe we're pumping anything, so I'm not, and I don't know the answer to that question, so.
Okay.
But we're putting in, yeah, I mean, it's not required by code, but we usually put an emergency generator in for convenience, just so that if power is lost for a few hours, people.
Well, I
can
understand, but I mean, my concern
charge
would be
their
where
light.
that would be located in terms of if any of the residents are going to hear that while it's running, because if they do need to run periodically for maintenance, and if they're going to be hearing that run on a regular, on a regular basis.
Okay.
Going back to just discussed on the parking garage, where you said there would be no guest parking. Is your overflow parking on the lower level there by the loading docks? Is that where you're anticipating where guests would park?
That is some of the guest parking.
There's only 7 spots plus 1 handicap. So to use that for both seems a little inefficient,
This is a little bit of an operational question, but I believe I have enough understanding to answer it.
So let me, I'm making a list of operational questions for Mr. Schwartz. I don't want to swear him in, it's going to
But
get
he
very
designed the
disjointed.
site plan, so why is it an operational question?
I mean,
You're asking
High level
how parking spaces are allocated, which is not a design question, that is respectfully an operations question. Mr. Schwartz will address that when he addresses operations questions.
But there are regulations around minimum parking, right? So how's that an operation?
Well, hold on, we have had testimony that, and let me bring up Mr. Savage again very quickly. Mr. Savage, you understand you're still under oath, correct?
Correct.
Does this site comply with the residential site improvement standards in all respects?
For this site, the required parking was 1.9 spaces per unit, which is that 381 spaces which we are providing on the site.
So my question was, does this application comply with RSIs?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But
Okay,
that
that's all.
doesn't really answer the question, though. Does that minimum standard include guests, or is that for residents only?
That's an entirety. That's
But you
an
just gave testimony that the garage was not for guests.
Well,
you literally just gave testimony to that.
Jack, no.
The applicant just whispered in his ear that it was for residents only.
No, hold on. Let me just, first of all, the law is that we have to comply with RSIS, and that was the testimony. You asked a question regarding guest parking. Mr. Raker has indicated he can't answer that question, so please don't mischaracterize his testimony. He's not answering that question. I very clearly said to you that Mr. Schwartz will be providing testimony with regard to operational questions, and he will specifically address your question.
I understand that, but that's not the, I mean, you can go back in the transcript. Somebody asked the question whether the garage was for residents only or for guests, and the answer was it was for residents only, and that there was overflow parking. So my follow-up question was, there's only 7 spaces plus 1 handicap space.
Right, and
that seems not enough parking.
What we've indicated was that Mr. Rakers is not providing testimony with regard to guest versus resident parking.
But he
Schwartz-
answered the question, and then you're like,
Can I just ask?
Mr. Schwartz will address that. I mean,
Are there going to be guest parking in the garage? Okay.
I can represent that
And we'll
the
get the
answer
number-
is
we'll
yes.
get the number with the traffic.
But if I swear at Mr. Schwartz right now.
and that's fine. The answer, that's fine. That's all we
I don't
need
want to
know.
provide the testimony, you understand, but we can make that representation, and Mr. Schwartz will provide the testimony at the appropriate time.
Okay, that's all I had to ask. That's all I wanted was so hard.
I think that there's going to be further testimony from this gentleman
Yes, well, certainly you can
at
have
the next
questions.
meeting, whenever that is. We haven't decided on that as yet. I'm wondering if anybody wants to kind of start to wrap it up this evening and come back, allowing this gentleman to continue offering some testimony unless there's an exigent question that we need to ask tonight because we're going to forget it.
I mean, do we have any more questions from the board? Because we could end it and then reserve the public for when it comes back.
I mean,
I would suggest that we don't sort of formally close this because he's going to be offering more new testimony.
No, I understand, but in terms of what he testified, if the board members don't have any other questions, we could
Jason's right.
move it on.
Maybe Alice is right also.
I know, I'm a little confused.
My advice would be, just leave it.
Right, that's sort of my,
Adjourn for right now and see what goes.
right, I agree.
He's not closing his testimony out yet.
No, we're bringing back Mr. Raker, and, he has some questions to answer, to ask, and he understands that he's subject to more questioning from the board professionals, and members of the public.
I think it was somewhat incomplete, and that's why I don't know that I want to just really wrap it up that much. I mean, if there was something really exigent from an audience member or from the public, I would entertain allowing for it, but his testimony is not complete. So maybe I'm asking a lot to hold it until the next meeting, and I'd like to figure out
When that is.
Before we do, I just have one real quick question. You touched on the roof plan. Just a quick 2-part question. Does the current roof as designed, will that accommodate future solar installation? And if so, would that also be screened by the parapet?
No, the roof's as designed, I'm not showing every penetration in that roof. I'm showing some of the mechanical limb that projects above. There's so many penetrations in that roof and so many items, there's really no room to put. So it would be a great thing if we could do it. And, you know, I'm sure the developer would love to get access to it, but it's just an impracticality on that roof.
Chair, one follow-up question since we're talking about the roof. I was going to hold this for next time. I asked this years ago before I was even involved for another applicant. Do you plan on, or would you be okay with if we condition this to have no satellite antennas added to the top of this roof in the future?
If I may clarify his question, we actually cannot prohibit satellite antennas. You may be referring to commercially leased cellular or wireless antennas.
That's it. Correct. Are there any plans for that?
I'm sure we wouldn't be putting cellular towers or antennas here, but I'll let the owner answer that question.
Yeah, we can agree to that.
As a condition of approval?
Yeah, we can agree to that condition of approval.
Thank you.
Understanding you would get a cut of that on the pilot.
I'm sorry?
You would get a cut of that on the pilot, Mr. Mayor, but we'll agree to the condition.
So generally, we, if I might, we have a meeting at the end of October. We usually do not have a meeting at all in November because it would fall upon Thanksgiving usually, or Thanksgiving week for the most part. And then we have a meeting the first Thursday, I believe, of December. That's usually what we do. That's our normal course of action. If December 1st, it would be this year? December 1st. So rather than have it at the end of everybody's Thanksgiving, falling on Thanksgiving, December 1st, does that work for you guys?
Yeah, actually, that time worked out perfectly because we had discussed at the beginning of the meeting, some scheduling with regard to stormwater management and green infrastructure. We won't be ready for that in October, but candidly, I think it makes sense to come back sooner rather than later so that Mr. Raker's testimony is fresh in the board and the public's mind so that we can finish with Mr. Raker's testimony. We may or may not be able to provide traffic testimony at that October meeting. We'll let you know. But we will not provide stormwater management testimony in the October meeting. I think a December 1st date is a good date to target for that testimony.
And just to let you know, beyond that, we usually do not have a meeting the fourth Thursday of December for obvious reasons. It's usually
nobody's around.
Christmas,
Yeah. Understood.
Right. It's the holidays. And then the next meeting we usually have is the fourth Thursday of January.
Right. So if we could come back with Mr. Raker in October.
Sure.
And then maybe plan for stormwater.
On December 1st.
On December 1st.
And probably continue it into January.
And I'm sure that may continue into January.
Okay. All right. Does anybody, so the next meeting is our regular meeting and we will continue to hear the architect. And Mr. Inglesino, you will let us know if our traffic engineer needs to be here?
Yeah, well in advance.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm sure he'll have.
Yeah, and also, as I said, there's a handful of operations questions that I've been keeping track of, which Mr. Schwartz will testify to, so we'll plan on swearing him in at the October meeting after Mr. Raker, so he can address those questions.
Landscaping at the October?
No, that
Well, the
goes with
landscape
the
architecture
stormwater.
is going to be paired with the stormwater management, as we discussed before, because there's overlap on the green infrastructure there, and I think that'll just present better for you.
The other thing that I did want to bring up is, there were a number of comments from the construction code official on, mostly on the architectural plan. So at the next meeting, I would also like to address the construction code officials' comments and any other comments from our zoning officer, et cetera, that were officially handed in.
Ashley, can you send me those? I don't recall getting those comments from you. Yeah, thank you.
If you go to our website at they're all,
Just send them to me, I appreciate it.
yeah, that's good.
Housekeeping.
Yes.
You had you had said our next meeting is October, keeping in mind we have a special meeting
Next,
next
yes,
Thursday.
I'm sorry
Just
about
in case
that.
anybody's watching, we have a special meeting for the master plan, is the only item on the agenda, next Thursday, which is live here.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And then, Mr. Messino, we have your consent, obviously, to carry this application until October 27th, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Messeri, that is correct.
Yes. Is it the 27th? Okay.
So this will be carried to October 27th, here in this room, 7:30, with no further notice required.
Correct, thank you.
So just so the public knows, we will not be providing you with any notice. The notice for the October 27th is being provided tonight. So right here, October 27th at 7:30, we'll resume the testimony of Mr. Raker, and we'll also hear operations testimony from Mr. Schwartz. And there's a possibility that we'll hear traffic testimony. We don't know that yet, but we'll certainly let the board secretary know so we can inquire with her as to that. The landscape architect will testify in December.
December 1?
December 1 is when we're going to hear.
And again in January, because I'm
Yeah.
sure that'll be a
December 1 in
mashup
January.
meeting.
The idea is to have the stormwater management and landscape architect testify back to back.
Any other questions? Anyone from the board? Again, we have a meeting next Thursday for the master plan. On that, I will take a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
There it is.
Second.
Anyone- The motion was made by Jason Heinman, I'm sorry, and seconded by Dave Fresky. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Like for adjournment, promotions that don't. Yeah, there's not. John. Some nations look like an alien, some nations look these are all